Salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the podcast, The Storm, where social awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene, talk, and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co host, the nerdy occultist, aka the authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Please note, I am wearing my special occasion hat, and I have booze because it's Easter and because of celebratory symmetry. Because Easter is to summer what Halloween is to winter, and I'm not gonna cause a freaking international incident no matter how much I dislike summer.
Alright. And I am your host, / Time Lord Wannabe in the Brainstorm Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am doing reasonably okay, I guess.
Yeah, I hope everyone's had a good Easter so far. Hello, Ed Brewer. He says, yo.
Hi, Ed.
Great. Okay, so we got kind of over flooded last week. So we're going to cover some things this week and cover some things next week.
Yeah, there's a lot of things, folks.
Every time. Every fucking time.
It's a feast or a famine. There is no in between. Either there is nothing to talk about and we have to reach, or there are all the things to talk about and we have to cram.
I feel like the universe hates us sometimes.
Yeah, to quote Morpheus from The Matrix, fate it seems is not without a sense of irony.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, this is it's the archive version. It's from the games industry.biz. Sarkeesian DEI initiatives are making your culture worse. It's written by Brendan Sinclair and published March 29th, 2023.
That's right, folks. She's back.
Oh, shit. There we go. Forgot to switch that back. But yeah. Dolan sent me this, so if anyone wants to blame Dolan for us talking about Anita Sarkeesian again, it's actually been a while, to be fair. I'm not gonna, I'm not.
She will always have a special place in a lot of our hearts because she, Zoe Quinn, and Brianna Wu pretty much single-handedly launched Gamergate by being ideologically moralistic incompetence. So I will always have a soft spot for Anita in that she basically created this little anti-SJW niche of ours.
Okay. Subheader is GDC session with feminist frequencies. Anita Sarkeesian says current corporate diversity efforts are part of the problem, offers ways to improve them. Is feminist frequency still a thing? Because I thought that died.
No, it basically died. The channel still exists, and she occasionally posts on it, but it's not. But she hasn't done the show Tropes versus Women in forever. Even though she still, I think she still has to make 6 shows to justify all the money that people blew on her back in the day.
I also want to mention we are never covering those. That I'm putting a foot down on that. By the way, I'm not.
We already addressed Macintosh, and he was her ghostwriter basically. So
yeah. All right.
But actually addressing the article at this point, Anita, my dear, you of all people on this fucking planet of ours, do not get to complain. You are the one who opened this box. You are the Pandora of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. You have unleashed this plague upon the world, and now you are complaining that it's destroying things. Yes, Anita, we always told you that. Everyone told you. It was known, Khaleesi. Seriously. You, of all people, shouldn't be complaining about this. You unleashed this horror upon the world, and now you are complaining because it has finally reached the point where that horror that Lovecraftian monster you raised from the depths is now eating you. Well, as the old saying goes, you made this bed, Anita. Now lie in it. Moving on, though.
Right. Okay. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a hot button topic in the games industry over the past decade, with numerous companies embracing DEI. Sorry.
It honestly should be diversity, inclusion, and equity. It makes more sense initialistically, but I think because they know that if they put the inclusion before the equity, it would spell die, and that wouldn't be a very palatable bit of optics for
Right.
them.
All right. Yeah. Let me start over just because I'll be honest. I am a little bit tired, which is weird because I took a nap like about an hour prior to all this.
Mm.
So, all right. Diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a hot button topic in the games industry over the past decade, with numerous companies embracing DEI efforts in the wake of scandals and tragedies that emphasize the inequality of industry specific companies or society as a whole.
Yeah, companies really shouldn't take moral stances just at all. Their main goal should be to provide a product that their consumer base actually wants to consume. Fuck morality, and I mean that in all cases with regards to companies. That means fuck your Christian values, Chick-fil-A. It means screw yours as well, Hobby Lobby. It also means that social justice has no place in these companies either. That's the stance I would take. I would prefer if no company had a moral dimension. I find it incredibly insidious that any for-profit entity could have a moral dimension, frankly. I find it incredibly insidious. Like, morality in my perfect world doesn't even belong in the public sphere, but it should be a personal, private choice. But, more to the point, if I was to allow morality to be involved in the public sphere, the only places it should honestly be are in institutions specifically made for it, like, your charities and your churches and so on, or occasionally the law. And quite frankly, I would prefer morality to be removed from law as well, because there is a philosophical difference between morality and ethics. Laws can be based on ethics, but they should not be based on morality. And that would be that once again would be my ideal state, is laws concern themselves with ethics but not morality. But certainly the last place either ethics or morality should be is in corporations, especially when we all know that you all use third world sweatshops. So any morality you want to insinuate in that context can just screw itself, frankly.
Moving on.
Yeah, moving on.
Okay. Uh, but despite high-profile chief diversity officer appointments and more pro-diversity communications from companies, Feminist Frequency Executive Director Anita Sarkeesian used her GDC session last week to say they are making little in the way of tangible improvements.
Because, Anita, your framework, the framework that you and your cohorts insisted on them adopting, is a nonsensical, abstract concept that has no basis in logic or reason or reality. The reason why these DIA initiatives aren't working has nothing to do with how committed these companies are to this ideology. These companies are actually quite addicted to this ideology and quite insistent on forcing this morality into everything that exists. I mean, for fuck's sake, ESG scores are basically the new Hays Code. What the Hays Code did for like traditionalist Christian family values morality in the old days, ESG scores basically do for social justice. It's not a question of the companies not being committed enough, let alone the fact that, every company in the Western world has an HR and PR department, and every single one of them is stocked with enough social justice educated academic wits to choke a average sized university. So it's certainly not these companies aren't dancing to your tune. It's that your tune was, and always has been a bad idea to implement. You don't get to blame the consequences of your own actions on somebody else. You opened this box, and this is what is inside it. You opened the Pandora's box of social justice onto the world, and now you're being faced with the organic consequences of that ideology, and you want to blame those consequences on someone other than yourself. Well, Anita, if anyone in this world is more accountable for the infestation of social justice into every nook and cranny of modern civilization than you, I I can't actually no. Maybe bell hooks. Maybe bell hooks because that's where you got most of your ideas from. Maybe someone like bell hooks or Gloria Steinem or Eve Ensler could take more of a share of accountability for this than you. But you're the one who actually brought it to the realm of popular culture and insisted that culture bend to your will. So yeah, no, people like you, Lacey Green, Francesca Ramsey, Zoe Quinn, and Brianna Wu can own your fucking shit, please. You unleashed this plague upon the world, and now it has finally grown strong enough to bite into you too. I don't want to hear it. You laid down with this dog. You don't get to blame someone else for the fleas. Moving on.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are framed as attempts to transform workplace environments into a space that is welcoming for all people, especially those historically underrepresented. Okay, as said, I'm not here to tell you that DEI is broken. Probably is. I'm here to tell you that DEI is working as intended, and that's the problem.
Given that the person who a lot of this shit is based on is you and your intentions, Anita, you are going to at some point take some of the blame for this, right? You're not just going to go, my intentions were perfectly moral and pure. It's everyone corrupting my intentions that's the problem. You're not going to do that, are you, Anita? You're not going to foist the blame of the monster you created off on someone else, are you? Never mind. Moving on.
Okay. One of the problems with DEI efforts as they exist is that they're still built on othering people who are not white, cis, hetero, or able. And while there certainly are some companies whose DEI efforts could be described as more performative than substantive, the intentions behind such efforts has little bearing when it comes to how effective they are.
If your ideology is ineffective, Anita, it is because There are logical inconsistencies inherent to the ideas that underpin them. No amount of extra effort, no amount of extra oomph is going to make this worldview make sense, Anita, because the worldview in question never made sense to begin with. It fails at the first hurdle. It fails at what I call the blueprint stage. No matter how many ways you try to make a lopsided table stand up straight, it's not going to stand up straight. No matter what materials you make it out of, if the blueprint itself, the you know codified idea that it's made from, doesn't work inherently. And social justice is very much an ideology that does not work inherently. It has logical problems. To hell with empirical oomph. To hell with the resources allocated to it. If the ideas themselves are inherently contradictory and don't make sense, nothing intelligible is going to be gotten out of them. And need I harp on this point once again, Anita? You and your ilk, you, Zoe Quinn, Brianna Wu, Francesca Ramsey, and Lacey Green, are the ones who brought this into the fore of popular culture. You don't get to complain now that it bit you in the ass. And I'm excluding Lacey Green for most of my anger here because she actually, over the course of the last few years, seems to have gotten somewhat based and regrets some of her earlier actions. So she is somewhat excused from this. But the fact remains, you and those people, the people you dragged to the UN to complain about your cyber harassment, are the sorts of people who brought this to the fore of corporate America. And surprise, freaking surprise, no matter how much control people like you have over corporate America, it's never going to be enough for you because you want your ideas to perfectly actualize in the world in such a way that it creates a utopia. But no amount of your ideas becoming actualized in the world will create said utopia, Anita, because empiricism aside, your ideas don't logically make sense. And you can't build a functional table off of a faulty blueprint, to use my usual metaphor. Moving on.
Right. Oh. Her work in recent years, Sarkeesian said she had spoken with numerous executives, managers, employee resource group leaders, active advocates, and DEI stakeholders, and come to one conclusion. It seems like DEI has been co-opted or created by the powerful to become a shield against criticism and real change, Sarkeesian said. A DEI manager I admire told me DEI uh, is often a panacea. It is the corporate embodiment of a watered-down liberatory movement. It is an attempt to produce equity in a system that is fundamentally inequitable and resist equity.
In other words, Anita, it's not that people aren't trying to actualize your ideas, it's that your ideas will always fizzle out because they don't make any coherent sense. It's not it's not that they've been co-opted, it's not that they've been corrupted, it's not that they're not following your commandments, oh your highness. It's that your commands never made sense to begin with. And people tried to tell you this all the way back in 2013, but you didn't listen. You called it harassment, you called it immoral, and you called all the people who pointed out the obvious to you invalid. And now here we are. Your worldview has had carte blanche for the last 7 years to a decade to run the world. And surprise, frickin' surprise, the world seems to be suffering under the yoke of your Pandora's box of an idea. Who knew? Oh, wait, everyone knew back in 2013, and everyone tried to tell you that this would happen. And here we are anyway, because you didn't listen to them. You thought that they were invalid, you thought that they were immoral, and you thought that their obvious issues with your ideology were harassment. So you ignored them, and you incentivized everyone else to either ignore or actively spite them. And now we're in a dystopia run by the moral fervor of social justice for the most part. And worse than that, Anita, prior to you and your ilk, the tradcons were mostly irrelevant. And fortunately, they're still largely irrelevant, but they have had more and more credibility foisted upon them by opposing your ilk than they ever had any right to. People actually listen to the likes of Gavin McGinnis and Matt Walsh now because some people are looking at social justice and thinking to themselves, traditionalism is at least more preferable to this. My answer, and a lot of people's answer, is fuck both of these morally authoritarian cunts. Neither of them has any say-so. Neither of them should have any say-so. But, according to some people, traditionalism is more preferable than social justice. And so you basically took a world where the four horsemen of new atheism, your Hitchens, Dawkins, Dennett, and Harris, had almost single-handedly killed tradcon moralism in the 90s, and you breathed new life into them by being so incompetent that you made them look preferable by comparison. Which honestly makes me hate you more, Anita, because I wanted a world where the golden age of the 90s, where neither of these opinions really carried much weight, I wanted that to continue for a century or so. But instead, we have social justice morally authoritating over the world, and we have the tradcons seemingly becoming more relevant by the minute because social justice is so badly mismanaging things that tradcon bullshit seems more preferable by comparison. And I still am sitting in the middle going, fuck both of you, neither of you get to have any say-so. Unfortunately, people are listening to my fuck both of these positions less and less, and actually looking at tradconism as though it's more preferable because of people like you, Anita, and your initiatives. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Sarkeesian specified that she doesn't feel that the people who do DIE. No, sorry. It seems more preferable to see DIE instead of DEI.
Yeah, it actually would be more well put together if it were that way around. But again, I think they avoided spelling out die because it spells out die, and that would have been a meme.
Yeah.
Although to be fair, a lot of the people who would have made it a meme make it a meme anyway by just stating that it is diversity, inclusion, and equity instead of the other way around. I think Jordan Peterson even advocated for changing the order when criticizing it, which honestly I don't disagree with him on. I disagree with Jordan Peterson a lot, but I don't disagree with him on that. Anyway, moving forward.
Right. Let me restart that. Sarkeesian specified that she doesn't feel that the people who do DEI work are failing, or that they are working toward an unworthy goal. Instead, she said they are working within corporate structures designed to be resistant to change, often with HR departments and executives that don't understand how systems of oppression impact all levels of decision making and personal interactions. All backed by legal teams that resist open and honest communication because of legal liabilities or even the risk of employees unionizing.
Okay, Anita, I'm gonna burst this bubble right quick for you. They're not resisting you, Anita. They have welcomed you at every turn since 2013. They basically rolled out the red carpet for you. They welcomed you and Zoe Quinn to the U-N. How much more welcoming do they have to be before you will feel welcomed, Anita? Again, it's not that they're not taking you seriously. It's not that they're not trying to actually address the things you want them to address. It's the things you want them to address either can't be addressed because of your ideology getting in the way, or are not sensible to address to begin with because they're nonsensical. Again, it's not as though evil corporate America is co-opting your message, Anita. It's that your message is nonsensical. And no matter how sincerely they try to address it, you will never be happy because, quite frankly, there's nothing in your ideology to make you happy. The wor- the world the world as you envision it is impossible, not because people aren't trying, but because logic simply is a thing, Anita. It's impossible because it's logically impossible. It's not it's not a lack of empirical effort that's the problem. It's that these ideas simply cannot be translated into the real world in any meaningful way. And when corporations try to translate these ideas into practice regardless, things crash and burn because this ideology seems to drain the quality out of anything it touches. Moving on.
Right. Uh, corporations typically will take the path of least resistance, but they are set up in ways that throw plenty of resistance in front of DEI. This work is further abstracted by the work of social justice and equity being essentially incompatible with the way corporations assess success through project management and quantifiable return on investment.
Okay, see, Anita, here's the problem. I wish that were the case. I wish the corporations back in 2013 looked at your ideology and said to themselves, this is fundamentally incompatible with capitalism. This is fundamentally incompatible with satisfied customers. Get the fuck out. I wish that happened, Anita. But the sad fact of the matter is they didn't do that. They in fact did the exact opposite. They saw your ideology, said, yes, this is the highest degree of morality we can think of, and tried in every avenue to apply it. That's why every corporation suffers under the yoke of an HR and PR department, and why every journalist basically has at least an onboard understanding of all of the social justice crap. Because rather than see to their own self-preservation like corporations should do, rather than speak to the profit motive like corporations should do, they actually agreed with you that corporations and capitalism are bad and tried to essentially destroy capitalism from the inside of itself. They essentially pulled a syndrome or a what was the name of the robot from Incredibles? The one that the only thing strong enough to penetrate it was itself.
Uh, I don't think it had a name.
Yeah, but they basically did that. They agreed with you almost instantaneously that capitalism was evil, probably because they themselves were dealing with some guilt, and they decided to essentially undermine and destroy capitalism from the inside of itself because the only thing strong enough to destroy capitalism was people working on the inside of capitalism. So no, they didn't use diversity, equity, and inclusion as a surface level bullshit thing. They so you essentially sold all of the HR and PR ladies that work for these companies, and they sold the CEOs, and the CEOs eventually figured out how to sell it to the investors. And now the investors are pissed because they're waking up and finding, hey, you promised me that this would actually work, and it doesn't appear to actually be working. What the fuck? And fortunately, that means that this ESG stuff is probably going to be fairly short lived. But in the meantime, Anita, I'm not going to let you operate in this world of illusion where companies are using it as a panacea to do whatever they want and use you as a human shield. If anything, it's the other way around. You came to these companies, said, here is how to make your company more moral, and the companies by and large said, yes, ma'am. What else can we do? The problem, Anita, is that they can only adapt so much of your ideology because only so much of your ideology actually can be adapted to the real world. And even the stuff they can adapt to the real world is having a negative impact on it because it's logically calibrated to do so. Moving on.
The cynical take is that DEI work as a hamster wheel that executives can throw all the troublemakers on who keep nagging about change, Sarkeesian said. It keeps the agitators running in circles until they burn themselves out, but rarely actually provokes leaders into handing over the keys to effect meaningful institutional change.
Again, you have this directly ass backwards. What this is effectively is a way for the people who work in HR and PR departments to put the CEOs and investors on a goddamn hamster wheel jumping from one hoop to another, and putting the artists also, at least the ones that haven't already been converted, on a hamster wheel jumping from one foot to the other, trying to make their products both moral and appealing to the audience. The audience that you tell them is out there surely. If you just stop being patriarchal, all the oppressed people will flock to you because they will see you as the one moral brand. That's the thing you sell them on. And so we live in a world where it's not the CEO actually at the top of the company. The CEO is the face of the company, but the people actually in charge more or less are the people in HR and PR. And every single one of those has their ideological framework in freaking social justice. So no, I'm not gonna let you continue to sit here and paint things exactly the opposite of what they are. You are in charge. It just so happens that your rules don't make any fucking sense, milady. Deal with it. Moving on.
Right. Okay. She noted that ERG leadership has a high rate of turnover in large part because their advocacy in ERG roles must be performed on top of the work they already do, so they tend to burn out more quickly. Sarkeesian also cited the penchant of companies to scale back the DEI budgets once social justice concerns fade from headlines or make them first on the chopping block during cost-cutting times.
You mean people are finally waking up and realizing that A, this morality of yours isn't one, i.e., it doesn't actually effectively create a more moral world, and that you're actively alienating their customer base and the quality of their product. So they're finally being dragged kicking and screaming to the position of maybe all the social justice bullshit is bullshit. And let's be honest, Anita, if Elon Musk hadn't made that point and dragged everyone else kicking and screaming to that position, this would have continued for another 5 years or so, probably. It just so happens that finally, after 7 years to a decade of this shit, the investors are finally noticing their wallets getting lighter and going, "Hold on there, my fellow, fellow malads. You promised us that this would actually make us both moral and profitable, and we're seeing a bunch of people claiming that we're immoral fuckheads, and we're seeing a bunch of people abstaining from purchasing our product. And this new and diverse audience of yours did not materialize to compensate. So what the actual fuck? I.e., the downsizing of DIE initiatives is only happening because people are finally waking up and realizing that you were full of shit all along. Granted, they would have known that if they had listened to the other side of this culture war in 2013, i.e., if Gamergate was rightfully heralded as the as being ahead of the curve like it actually was, rather than being the devil, which is how most journalists view it. But we don't live in that world. We don't live in the world where you were told everything that was wrong with you and people therefore ignored you and didn't listen to you. We're in the world where people shut up all the people who were disagreeing with you, called it harassment, called it immoral, and called them invalid, and opened wide the gates of their corporations to anything and everything you could possibly unload on them. Moving on.
Okay. Slightly lesson on take is that executives have the will to change, but also the fear of change. She said, they are stuck in a corporate system that is restrained to this change. This is baked into the structures of corporations, regardless of who is in charge.
No, Anita, they changed everything they could possibly change about their product, about their IPs, about their marketing strategies, about their hiring policies, about the way their corporations were actually structured vis-a-vis the HR lady and the PR person now basically use the CEO and the CFO as a puppet. Like, they changed literally everything they could imagine. The problem was that those changes weren't good changes because the ideology in question was not a sensible or logical ideology to begin with. It's not that they didn't jump through all the hoops you insisted they jump through, Anita. It's that the consequences of all that jumping through hoops is now setting in, and you therefore want to blame this on the fact that someone somewhere must have co-opted you along the way. Well, the sad truth, Anita, is that no one did. You got exactly what you begged for. You got exactly what you wished for. You just don't like the consequences of the thing you asked for. And so you're trying to find a way of basically saying, this isn't social justice's fault. This is not true social justice because someone must have corrupted it along the way. Real social justice has never been tried, as the old meme goes. Well, no, Anita, real social justice has been tried. It's just it doesn't lead to the consequences you were expecting because you were being irrational when you envisioned that utopia back in the day. And everyone told you that you were being irrational envisioning that utopia back in the day, but you didn't listen because you thought they were all immoral. Well, reality doesn't give a fuck about what you want to be true in the abstract, and it never has. I'm honestly surprised, along with everyone else, that it took this long for those chickens to come home to roost. But they did eventually. You were basically running on borrowed time for 10 years, and now it is time to pay for the Faustian bargain you made. You took your soul and bet it all on the altar of social justice. Well, you made the bet. You made the bet. You sold your soul, and along comes the metaphorical Mephistopheles to get you to pay up. And unsurprisingly, like every other debtor, you don't like to pay for the things you purchase because you didn't see the fine print of the contract, as it were. Moving on.
Right. She said corporations view DEI efforts as a virus to expel because they are disrupting the norms of a system which is constantly trying to preserve its state of equilibrium. Even when they adopt DEI efforts, they tend to do it in an unchallenging way. For example, she notes that more than 76% of DEI officers are white, and even in DEI roles, men are paid more than women on average.
Because men do more work than women, but that doesn't mean that women aren't given the appropriate amount of authority in those positions. In fact, usually it's the woman in middle management telling the man what to do, and then the man tries his damnedest to do it. And corporations have finally begun to see DEI as a virus to be expelled 10 years down the line after literally opening wide their gates and telling you to do whatever you wanted. Again, Anita, you brought this plague onto the world. You unleashed it. You raised this Lovecraftian demon from the depths. You can't complain about the natural organic consequences of the virus that you unleashed on the world. We we all said this was a virus back in 2013. We who were part of Gamergate, we who are or were part of Comicsgate, we who were part of the Phantom Menace. the actual fans, the actual people who cared about the quality of the product and the integrity of the IP. We told you this would happen. The only thing we were wrong about was how quickly it would happen. Apparently, these corporations did have enough disposable income to literally spend 10 years trying to make their corporations more moral rather than being profitable, qualitative, or likable. And they could tread water for those 10 years. But finally, after 10 years of this shit, they are finally beginning to wake up and realize, hey, that 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 merchant who sold us the invisible cloth that only really virtuous people could see, they may have been conning us this whole time, and they may have been conning themselves and not even realize they were conning us. Who knew? But that doesn't change the fact that this is a natural end result of what you and yours did. And and you're acting as though this is how they reacted the whole time. But that's not true. For a good solid 7 to 10 years, they genuinely believed everything you told them, Anita. It's only now, after realizing just how badly they fucked up, they're finally starting to treat these initiatives like they should have been treating them all along, like an arbitrary moral nuisance that has no business in their companies. And only then, because people like Elon Musk finally got the rest of the rich people to pay attention and dragged them kicking and screaming to that position. If Elon hadn't done it, no one would have probably. Moving on.
Right. It's obviously replicating the exact problems of the system itself, she said. The path of least resistance here is hiring more white people and paying them more because that's what we know. And that's what we've been doing.
Anita, my dear, I'm gonna explain to you why the majority of people in those uh, in those departments are white, and you're not gonna like the answer, but I'll explain it for you, dear. The reason why the majority of people in those positions are white is because social justice is popular amongst middle class to upper middle class white women who are college educated and their simp male feminist colleagues who are also usually white. Like the reason why those positions are normally filled by those kind of people is because you and your ilk are predominantly white, upper middle class, well educated cunts and or male simps of said well educated white upper middle class cunts. Like those are those are the only two people social justice is actually popular with. People like you and people like your ex, Jonathan McIntosh. And that's all the people who have ever been interested in social justice, frankly. That and sometimes um gay people you've conned into believing this is how to advance their positions, or black people who actually who you've conned into believing all this grie- grievance mongering shit. This is why I didn't take a drink yet, because I knew if I did take a drink, I'd get even more tongue tied. But more to the point, the the reason why the majority of people in these positions are white and upper middle class in India is because social justice is only popular amongst the white and upper class predominantly. Doesn't mean doesn't mean there aren't counterexamples, but in general, the people you're going to get who are interested enough in social justice to do it professionally are bougie cunts like yourself and your erstwhile boyfriend, Jonathan McIntosh. And unfortunately, I hate to say we told you so, but a lot of us back in the day did tell you so. The people in Gamergate who were various different kinds of minorities, ahem, or the people in Comicsgate who were various different kinds of minorities, also ahem, and the people in the Phantom Menace who were also various different kinds of minorities, and all of them either lower middle or working class. We all told you that nobody but upper middle class, hyper educated cunts were interested in this and you didn't believe us. Well, unfortunately, reality doesn't care about your abstract conceptions. The case is the case. Moving on.
Right. The D. Also, hello, Giant Turtle. He says Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, Dragon Turtle.
The DEI discussion is intertwined with issues of workplace culture and harassment, abuse, and harm in the workplace, largely because of how often the victims of such harm are from underrepresented groups. To that end, Sarkeesian offered four principles that she believes are necessary for the industry to change, all of them informed by a desire to move from systems of punitive justice to transformative justice.
Anita, the industries are changing. You just don't like the way they're changing because they're finally waking up from your bullshit. Again, you unleashed this plague upon the world, and people are finally becoming immune to it, and you don't appear to like that people are becoming immune to it. And that appears to be your only criticism. Also, everyone gets harassed at some point in their lives. You just don't care when people you don't like or don't give a shit about get harassed. You only care when you can weaponize that harassment for some kind of moral um, abstraction. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Give me 1 second. I was taking a drink of water. Okay. All right. So yeah, okay, here are the four principles. Number one, harm does not happen in a vacuum. Sarkeesian said it's not enough to find and punish the guilty parties who commit harm. Instead, companies need to examine the conditions that allowed that harm to happen in the first place. What systems of power and oppression were present in dynamics around a specific incident.
Okay, and I'm smiling because I noticed the little canard that you didn't notice. What about all the people who have been inconvenienced, marginalized, and oppressed by your ideology? What about the people social justice has harmed, both indirectly, like psychologically, and categorically, like they've lost their jobs or their quality of work has suffered because they're trying to jump through social justice hoops? What about all the people social justice has oppressed and harmed? What about all the IPs that social justice has ruined? What about all the products that no longer have any sort of quality control, or quality control is seen as immoral because of social justice? Are you going to address those at any point, Anita? Are you going to ever actually take responsibility for the monster you and your ilk helped create, Anita? Or are you just going to keep pretending that you were the good ones all along, and it's only because the world didn't entirely um, conform to your will, no matter how hard it tried, that problems still exist? Moving on.
Uh, okay. Number two, need to break cycles of harm and prevent future violence. It's not enough to respond only to harm that's already happened. You need to keep it from happening again.
By deconverting from social justice, Anita. That's what people are finally doing after 7 to 10 years of listening to your every word and doing exactly what you say, Anita. Corporations are finally waking up and realizing this ESG score nonsense, this social justice nonsense, might not be good for the bottom line, don't you know? Largely because Elon was the vanguard for this and showed everyone the way that they could be actual corporations again without the crutch of social justice and morality in general. And thank God for Elon, but that's neither here nor there. But yes, we do need to break cycles that harm people, Anita. And first and foremost, I would prefer to break the cycles that are rooted in morality. Which, yes, does also mean getting rid of the tradcon evangelical family values types. what little inroads they've made into this sphere. But it also definitely and for sure means finally, after 7 to 10 years of listening to your every word, telling you finally to shut the fuck up, just like everyone else back in 2013 in the old Gamergate days told you to, and going back to being sustainable corporations who are more interested in the quality of their products, the relationship with their fan base, and of course, their bottom line than they are with being moral. This is one of the reasons why I would really, really prefer if corporations didn't insist on jamming the wrench of morality into otherwise already functional works.
Moving on, or
I just saw something Dragon Turtle said, and I'm trying to read it. Unfortunately, Dragon Turtle, it's because this ideology has gone unopposed for 7 to 10 years, and some people are low informed enough. They if if a person who claims to be an expert and who claims to have authority and who claims to be normal sells them something, they don't really think much of it beyond, well, this person who seems respectable said it, therefore it must be true. However, I think that once ESG scores and all that nonsense gets phased out, and it won't be long now, a lot of them will go back to being like, wait, yeah, that doesn't make much sense. I think a lot of people are not red pilled not because they're choosing to take the blue pill, but because they've simply never been offered the red pill, i.e., they've never seen people like Sargon circa 2017. They've never seen people like Short Battle Talk. They've never seen people like you and me, because they believe that anything that happens online is inherently less legitimate than things that happen in the halls of officialdom. But I think once the money is drained out of social justice and corporations go back to normal and people can see the obvious difference in quality between a life lived by social justice rules and a life not lived by social justice rules, I think a lot of people are going to deconvert without even realizing they're deconverting, oddly enough. Yeah, yeah, there are people who commit the special pleading fallacy like it's going out of frickin' style, but I hope to God once once um once the wheel starts turning on how awful social justice is, and by proxy also how awful traditionalism is, people will mostly go back to clustering towards the middle. I hope, because otherwise it's Weimar Germany all over again, except this time in the U.S. And I really don't want that to happen, but who knows?
anyway, moving on.
And moving on.
Okay. God, where's my phone so fucking... All right. We must support people. Number 3. We must support people who were harmed in their healing and the people who caused them harm in their accountability. Okay, so I mean that's
So are you going to apologize to Sargon for calling him a garbage human at VidCon, Anita? Are you going to apologize to all the people that you insinuated were Nazis by proxy? Are you ever going to acknowledge or even become aware of the fact that you and your ideology have harmed a fuck ton of people, Anita? No? Well then shut the fuck up. I'm not going to let you claim the moral high ground on this one. If you are serious about this thing you have just said, this we have to make amends to people who have been harmed, then please, by all means, start with the harm that you yourself have wrought. If you can't even conceive of how you've harmed people, Anita, then it seems like the only person who needs to hear this advice is you. Because everyone else is perfectly capable of acknowledging when they harm others, Anita. It's only people who have the moral permission in their own heads to harm people and therefore don't consider it harm that really, really honestly and for truly need this lesson, Anita. Moving on.
To be fair, that was only the title of the principle, not the actual description.
I know, but it's god damn it.
Those who
The,
are
the irony is going to kill me one of these days.
those who were harmed need care and opportunities for peace and post-traumatic growth. But the people who caused harm also need better ways to reflect on and understand their own view. I mean, that's basic shit. To be fair, that's
And again, I see your incredibly basic moral principle that you for some reason don't think everyone holds to, Anita. And I raise you, so are you going to be reflecting at any point? Rather than proclaim on the freaking mountain like you're the second coming of feminist Jesus, that other people need to be reflective, other people need to be self-aware, other people need to realize how they've hurt people. Are you going to at any point internalize this principle and look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself the very obvious question, have I ever hurt people? Because in my in my epistemology, Anita, in my framework, virtue should be exothermic, i.e., they should start from within and radiate outwards, i.e., I'm not going to hold someone to a principle that I personally can't live up to. Do you see? Which means that if I ask myself the question, if I hold to the principle of those who have harmed others should reflect on it and so on, my first port of call, if I'm internalizing this principle, is to reflect on myself internally and say, have I ever hurt someone in a way that was gratuitous or avoidable in some way? And then, based on the answer to that question, I act accordingly. I don't assume by default that I'm too morally pure to ever harm anyone, and therefore it's everyone else who is my moral inferior who needs to reflect. But you, Anita, appear to once again be missing your own goddamn point entirely by assuming by default that you are too pure to ever make the slightest mistake, and therefore it's everyone else's fault when bad things happen because of your own ideas. Moving on.
okay. These two are interconnected because accountability enables a person to truly offer substantial acknowledgement, apology, and repair to those that they have harmed. So Sarkeesian said.
So, Anita, is me in this segment holding you accountable for the shit that you and your ilk caused 10 years ago? Is me holding you accountable for all that bullshit legitimate, forcing you to reflect on your actions, or is it, like it always has been according to you, harassment? I'm gonna take a wild stab in the dark here and say that if you saw this segment, you would consider it harassment. You would consider me yelling at you to be disproportional compared to all the bullshit that you've done in the last 7 to 10 years to popular culture by proxy. And yet you are going to sit here and lecture me about how I need to be reflective. I am quite reflective, Anita, and that's because, as I just went over there, my principles apply to me first, and everyone else as and when I can actually live up to them. You don't think your rules apply to you because they don't have to, because you're already the purest, most decent person ever to live. And that is the way a narcissist thinks, Anita. A narcissist is someone who thinks that they are so perfect that they never need to make amends for anything they've done wrong, because of course they've never done anything wrong to begin with. especially when they then turn around and go and say, it's everyone else who needs to be morally reflective until they can live up to my perfect godly standard, derp. Yet no, Anita, if you are not willing to admit that you've done the slightest thing wrong, especially given that this article is basically you going, well, this DEI stuff that I advocated for so long doesn't appear to be working. Whose fault could this be? Surely not mine. That's the whole premise of this article. The whole premise of this article is basically, well, I was instrumental in creating this whole DEI shenanigans. It's a shame it's not working like I insisted it would. It must be someone else's fault though, because it couldn't be a problem with me or the ideology itself, derp. That's what you're doing. You're standing there morally lecturing everyone else about not being reflective and not being conscious of how they've harmed people, when in actuality you are the person in this exchange most guilty of harming people and not reflecting on that. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Four. It's all about us. The current systems are failing us and break out of the cycle. Oh, sorry. Let me read that. I misspoke. The current systems are failing us, and to break out of those cycles, we seriously need to skill ourselves up. Sarkeesian said. Create stronger ways of being connected to each other, healthier relationship, de-escalation skills, communication skills, expressing feelings in non-destructive ways, and put the work into unlearning toxic narratives and beliefs. Every little
So
decision.
in other words, Anita, your solution to the problem that you created in the last 10 years, and I am putting this at your feet, Anita, because you, Brianna Wu, Zoe Quinn, and people like Francesca Ramsey and Lacey Green, although again, some of my rage is suspended in the relationship to Lacey Green because she has actually developed some accountability for the shit she did and actually regrets a lot of it. So she is somewhat excused. But all y'all rest of the social justice types, your solution to this ideology we advocated for doesn't appear to be working is we just need to double down on it harder. We must not be doing social justice enough, and that's the problem. Yet no, Anita, that's just going to result in another 10 years you coming back and saying the problems I said we should fix are apparently getting worse. But surely it isn't a factor of social justice inherently. It must be that we're not doing it right. And you'll try harder and harder and harder and harder until civilization collapses under the weight of your moral fervor. You'll basically create a secular theocracy of social justice long before you ever realize you've done a damn thing wrong and that your ideology might not be the most sacrosanct, saintly thing in the universe. Just like every other moral twit. Everything must be subservient to my thing, and even things that are subservient to my thing need to be better because it's not creating the utopia that I swear my thing is going to bring about on the earth. Dumbass. Moving on.
Right. Okay. Number four. This is all about. Sorry. Every little decision you make, every case you handle, you've got to look at it through all of these lenses.
What about the lens that says you might be wrong about anything ever, Anita? The lens that exists outside of your Overton window, that one, the the one that's actually in the meaningful minority. Does that lens ever get invited to the party? Or oh no, that lens is the lens which is immoral. Never mind. Never mind. Carry on building your social justice secular theocracy. I'm sure it'll be fine. Fucking hell. Moving on.
In addition to those principles, Sarkeesian noted some specific actions companies could take, starting with a shift in how they even talk about issues. There's a big difference. we want to be welcoming, and we have not been welcoming to women, BIPOC, trans, queer, / disabled folks. Here's how we're going to make that right, she noted. That shift to an active stance, the acknowledgement of past failings, puts the focus more on the impact of those who are affected rather than on the intention of the privilege, she said.
So, Anita, are you ever going to acknowledge the fact that, regardless of your intentions, social justice is a batshit crazy ideology that is logically incoherent and actually hurts a lot of the people that you claim to be advocating on the behalf of? Because I can tell you, as someone who is both vehemently anti-SJW but also physically disabled and queer, quote unquote, that I hate social justice. I find it to be actively counterproductive. I find it to be restrictive. I find it to be prudish, and I find it to be moralistic in every worst way that could apply. So, are you going to respect my beliefs as a queer disabled person at any point
Be right back.
and dismantle social justice, or do I have internalized self-hatred because derp Stockholm syndrome for the patriarchy or some shit? This is this is only going to go round in circles until you acknowledge the fact that you have an excuse in your ideology that allows you to claim that anyone who disagrees with you in the demographics you claim to speak on the behalf of, you have a mechanism in your ideology whereby if you don't like what someone says, no matter what demographic they're a part of, you can just claim that they hate themselves and that they're invalid and that they're morally impure and therefore not admissible to the discussion. As long as you have that escape valve, I don't want to have a conversation with you. Because if I ever put a foot out of line ever, then I have Stockholm syndrome for the patriarchy or some shit, and I hate myself and am invalid or something. That's what internalized oppression effectively means. It means your opinion doesn't matter because you're morally invalid, because you have Stockholm syndrome for the devil, because we say so. That's that's what that effectively means. It's your original sin has corrupted you to the point that you no longer get to have an opinion on moral matters. It's the same shit the church used to pull, and I wasn't falling for it when they did it either. It doesn't matter if it comes from you or if it comes from freaking St. Augustine. I think you're both cunts, and I want both of you to shut up. Moving on. Um, not really sure what you're, not really sure what you're getting at there, Dragon Turtle. I'm pretty sure there's a typo in there because there appears to be a missing not in there. I think what you want to say is at least in Stockholm syndrome, you're not usually seen as Judas, but there's a missing not in there.
I'm back.
Yeah. There's a lot of slurs thrown around about women who aren't feminists, especially if they're not traditionalist either. If heaven forfend a woman should ever be an egalitarian instead of a feminist or a traditionalist. That then you're everyone's devil.
So, I'm back.
Yeah, moving on.
Right. So, Jen, yeah, okay. Such active acknowledgement of wrongdoing is a first step toward righting the situation, but it's too often missing when companies address harms. You can't say sorry without naming what you did wrong, Sarkeesian said. You can't make things better while pretending nothing's wrong. But, okay, so Don, before you,
So, Anita, are you ever going to take your first? Go ahead.
I just got like one brief thing. I just want to point out that this is basic stuff you learn as a fucking toddler, and she's saying it like it's some profound thing.
Yeah, because she thinks everyone is subhuman and immoral and invalid and needs to be educated on the basic gist of morality because only social justice conveys any true morality, apparently.
Okay, but please, have a point.
My point that I was gonna make, Anita, you just admitted that all of that is the first step to fixing what you've done wrong, is admitting that you've done wrong and not pretending like you've never done anything wrong. So, Anita, when exactly are you going to admit about all the stuff you've done wrong? Or are you going to carry on pretending that you never did anything wrong ever? Because according to your own definitions, Anita, that means that you are part of the problem. Especially given that the thing you're criticizing is DEI, which is an ideology or is a institution that you, Brianna Wu, Zoe Quinn, Francesca Ramsey, and Lacey Green basically almost single-handedly created as a cultural artifact. Thus, you are criticizing something that you and your ilk helped to make, and helped to popularize, and helped to make a thing in the world. And yet you just said the first step in undoing the wrongs you have done is admitting that you did those wrongs and not pretending like you haven't done anything wrong. But I'm seeing a lot of pretending like I didn't do anything wrong coming from you, Anita. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of naming the thing you did wrong. So you have failed your own first step shit test by your own standards. You claimed this is the first step to fixing these problems in this thing that I create, in the thing that I indirectly helped create. And then you proceeded not to do that first step. So fuck you, Anita. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Sarkisian are also suggested doing away with zero tolerance policies because they don't allow for mistakes, growth, or change, and they instead make people afraid to do or say anything that might be misunderstood or even ask questions.
Anita, the entire premise of tropes versus women in video games is that extremely minor ephemera about video games were signs of wide-ranging structural issues within video games. And now that you have realized just how befucked your idea of zero tolerance policies for these immoralities are, now you are making claims about mercy and clemency. Now that you've fucked everything up for the last 7 to 10 years and change, now, now you think to yourself, gee, guys, it seems like we may have been a little bit harsh with this whole cancel culture thing. Maybe we should have some kind of attempt at clemency and mercy and allowing people to grow and change and shit. Well, gee, Anita, in a sane moral system, that's sort of the starting position, not the thing that you add tangentially as and when you think of it 10 years down the line. What I'm saying, Anita, is that frankly, if you were going to institute this as part of the ideology, you probably should have done that first thing and not immediately jump to literally everyone and everything criticizing me or any contrary position of mine is the devil incarnate and secretly Nazis and fascists and derp. Like, like these two positions are very, very incompatible, and yet your entire platform is based on the assumption that anyone who criticizes you or your moral positions is the devil. So, yeah, Anita, I'm sorry, but either you have to go back all the way through everything you've done since 2013 and undo it, or at least print a retraction for all of it, or you don't get mercy. I'm not going to allow you to have this mercy for me, but but moral invalidation for everyone else. Like that's not the game we're playing. What it very much seems like to me, Anita, is that you don't like that the Reaper you helped to raise is now cutting your head off as well, or at least about to. Well, I'm sorry, Anita, but once again, as I said at the beginning of this bullshit, you and your ilk opened this Pandora's box. You basically are the proverbial Pandora in this relationship. You unleashed this plague of social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion onto the world. You don't get to complain now that the monster you created is finally strong enough to live without you, and therefore is coming to come for you like it's come for everything else. I'm sorry, you don't get to it's a bit late in the game to be begging for mercy, Anita. You didn't you didn't offer any mercy to Sargon when you called him a shithead and garbage human in 2017. You didn't have any mercy for any of the people that you complained to the UN about. You didn't have any mercy for anyone who disagreed with you or John McIntosh back in the day. You didn't have any mercy for choice feminists even. Remember that speech, Anita? Remember the speech you gave where you said the idea of choice feminism is inherently hurting women? You didn't have any mercy for that ideology, even though it's just another kind of fucking feminism. No, no mercy for any of that, but mercy for you. Now that the monster you've created is finally strong enough to kill you as well as everything else. No, Anita, no. You made this bed and now you will lie in it. You you unleashed this plague on the world. Shame on you for assuming you would eventually get sick with it. Moving on.
All right. Da, 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 da. Instead of zero tolerance policies or we don't tolerate harassment, Sarkeesian said, what would it feel like to hear harassment, abuse, assault has happened here? People were hurt and treated in ways that are not acceptable. The individuals are responsible, but so are we as the culture and community that allowed it to happen. Here's how we're going to start changing the way we talk about and look out for these things.
So are you ever going to admit that harassment was mostly not an issue before you made it one? Are you ever going to admit that this atmosphere of moral hysteria, like witch trial finger pointing, is your fault, at least indirectly? Are you ever going to take some responsibility and point out to yourself, gee, maybe I, Anita Sarkeesian, in my infinite wisdom, may have done something wrong here? Or are you just going to keep pretending like your ideas were perfect from the get go, or by proxy, Bell Hook's ideas were perfect from the get go, and it's the corrupt way everyone else instituted them that's the problem? Are you going to pull the this isn't real social justice hasn't been tried yet thing? Or are you maybe going to admit to yourself that part of this at least is your fault? And then once you've admitted that part of this at least is your fault, the truth, Anita, is that the majority of this is your fault. You and people like you and your ideological colleagues, this is your fault. And once again, you don't get to go for a mulligan 7 to 10 years down the line and say, "Whoops, I didn't see any of this coming." No, you did. You did, Anita. You advocated for it. You advocated that Mario was problematic, and that Lara Croft was problematic, and that anyone who enjoys basically mainstream games is an evil sexist and alt right and a Nazi and a troll and insert whatever buzzword was going around that day. Like you created this nightmare and you forced it upon the world. You can suffer with it just like all the rest of us, Anita. I, quite frankly, I'm still on the position of I wish no one had to suffer with this, and that would include you by definition, but you, of all people, don't get to come to me and say, well, this was a bad idea, especially when you don't even acknowledge that it was your bad idea to begin with. when you eventually come to terms with what you've done and 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 come to me humbly and say, I fucked up. Anita Sarkeesian was the problem, or was a large majority of the problem. When you do that, maybe we can have this conversation about mercy and clemency. But until you at least acknowledge that it was you who brought this on the world, you can get fucked, Anita. Moving on.
Okay. Instead, Sarkeesian wants to see paths for lower level everyday interventions and the ones that don't make people worry about that any given interaction could include an unintentional but fireable offense.
Okay, Anita, I'm going to explain to you why this will never work in your framework, okay? Because if people were not worried about getting fired, the majority of the people on the ground would not permit themselves to go along with this shit. Large amounts of people only go along with this shit. The average day-to-day worker only goes along with this shit because they know that the sword of Damocles is hanging over them. If you remove that sword of Damocles, you will basically rob social justice of all of its power. Because all other things being equal, without the threat of the sword of Damocles coming down on people's heads at random, they wouldn't choose to adopt this ideology. Same with every other hyper strict morality out there. If it weren't for the threat of, fire and brimstone, a lot of people wouldn't be fundamentalist Christians. And if it weren't for the threat of firing and professional blacklisting and basically unpersoning, very few people would actually willingly choose to be under the yoke of social justice. So that's the main reason why you in particular shouldn't be advocating for this. Because the minute you remove that sword of Damocles, the minute you remove you will lose your livelihood and everything you hold dear if you don't adhere to every letter of my ideology, people will stop adhering to it because people don't like your ideology, Anita. I I don't know what's going on in your head where you imagine a world where social justice adopts some kind of clemency position and then people will still keep adopting it. But I'm sorry to say, Anita, the minute that you take away the sword of Damocles from people's heads, they will start to think for themselves. And the minute they start to think for themselves, they will think of a bunch of reasons why your position is bullshit. Because your position is bullshit. And always has been. And probably always will be. Moving on.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze for a second. Okay. He also suggested setting up caucuses. I can't remember what that up just because I don't know that word. Sorry.
If anyone on this earth is a true believer of social justice, I think Anita is probably the example. Especially given the number of times she cited bell hooks and basically considered bell hooks to be her idol. I think this is very much coming from a sincere place. The everyone who disagrees with me is a troll thing and let me monetize my harassment thing, that might be disingenuous, but in terms of what she believes in the privacy of her own thoughts, I think she genuinely believes all the social justice crap. In answer to your question, Dragon Turtle. At the most, I think she views the weaponizing the harassment thing as a tactic, and like 8 to 9 times out of 10, I don't even think she realizes it's a tactic. I think she genuinely believes she got harassed,
Uh,
or at the very least, she has come to believe it over time. There may have been a time back in like 2013 that she didn't think she was actually being harassed, but I think in this day and age, she has bought her own bullshit so much that she definitely believes that she was harassed back in 2013.
right. Okay. I was looking at that word, caucusis, which caucus, yes, the plural version, which is
Hmm?
uh, they used a really obscure word for like meeting or assembly.
Caucus? Is
Yeah,
that the word?
caucus, caucuses, which is the plural.
Okay. I was confused because I don't think I don't think you said it right, and
I,
that was
I
making
know
me
I
confused.
know I didn't say it right, but
But yeah, caucuses. It's like a formalized meeting.
okay. Um, just threw that random word, like this article just threw that random word in there, so I was just like,
Yeah, you know these people. They speak in dissertation even more than I do.
right. Anyway, let me start over. He also suggested setting up caucuses of privilege, employee resources groups for people who have privilege to learn together about that privilege, particularly executives and C-suite officers. Uh, while everyone has a role to play, Sarkeesian said too often companies make it up to marginalize people to convince others about their humanity. What the fuck?
So in other words, Anita, how are we going to fix this problem with the social justice movement that I spawned? Oh, we'll just double down on social justice. That should fix it. Derp. And are you, or will you, ever admit to the ways in which you, Anita Sarkeesian, are and have been privileged? Because I'll tell you what, most people don't get the freedom to point out their criticisms to a corporation and have the corporation basically bow down in the most subservient pose possible and say, "Yes, ma'am, how can we serve you?" Because Gamergate certainly didn't have that. Comicsgate certainly didn't have that. The Phantom Menace certainly doesn't have that. Brainstorm and I have sat here for hours and hours and hours, basically single-handedly rewriting half of the bad writing from most of these IPs, and we've never, as far as I know, gotten a call about it. Like, you don't seem to realize how much of a privileged person you are, Anita. You you were being harassed online, at least according to you, and the U freaking N took it seriously and thought about ways they could legislate the problem away for you. I I don't even think it can be understood just how privileged you, Brianna Wu, and Zoe Quinn were back in the Gamergate days, let alone all of the privilege by proxy that a lot of your contemporaries had. People like Francesca Ramsey, people like Lacey Green, um, people like Trey Melvin, and so like the people who like I mean, how you you called someone a garbage human on stage during a panel at 2017's VidCon, and the convention didn't shun you and shame you for this. They didn't. They didn't say, Miss Sarkeesian, you can't speak to our attendees that way. They didn't say you will finish out your contractual obligations at this year's VidCon and never be invited back. No, they took your side against Sargon, Computing Forever, the Honey Badgers, Dr. Ranabacam, and a bunch of other anti-SJW attendees of the convention who had paid to get in. And you were invited to VidCon, all expenses paid, and were basically given um a bag of merchandise gratis. So I'm sorry, you're gonna have to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of mirror gazing before I take you seriously on the topic of privilege, Ms. I can get harassed online according to me and be taken seriously by the U freaking N. Sarkeesian. Just rage. Moving on.
Okay. Above all else, I urge for transparency, she said. We have to talk about what's happening, the isolation, the confusion, the rumors, the misunderstandings that come with keeping everything quiet is not helping.
I'm now going to dust off a very old Thunderfoot meme, Anita. Speaking of transparency, Miss Sarkeesian, where did all that money go? The money you were paid to do Tropes versus Women that never made it on screen? And also, why haven't you finished the like 6 more segments of Tropes versus Women you have to do? That was paid for back in 2014? Like, on the topic of transparency, would you like to show us your financial records from GoFundMe and what's the other one that she used? The Indiegogo. Like, would you like to show us your financial records on those points, Anita? While we're all just sitting here comfortably talking about transparency. Oh my, you seem to have gone quiet. Never mind. Moving on.
All right, last bit here. There's a lot of nuance here with balancing confidentiality, respecting privacy, as well as not leaning into public shaming. But somehow, some way, we need to find a way to hold narratives together as a group so there's a collective accountability in addressing that what happened wasn't okay and that we all want to support any healing, changing, and cycle breaking that's needed.
The cycle that I'm interested in breaking is the cycle where your morality has carte blanche to rule the world, Anita. Are you going to support me in that cycle breaking at any point? No? Oh my, how queer. Moving on. Is that the end of the article?
Yes, I'm sending my thing.
That was a lot quicker than I thought it would be.
We've been on that for an hour and a half.
Yeah, and based on how long that article was, I assumed it would be longer. But yeah, no, it went much quicker than I thought it would. Neat.
Okay, next thing. This has been making the rounds last week.
Mm-hmm.
The official trailer for Blue Beetle.
Mm-hmm.
I think I sent this, right?
I can't remember which of us what it was that sent this. I think I did, but I might be wrong.
No, I think you did send it, but I had already grabbed it like immediately as soon as it like came out, and I just put it on the list because I just assumed would be covering it.
That's probably true because I know I sent the follow-up article.
Yeah. I know. Well, and we'll get to that later.
Yeah, cross that bridge when we come to it.
All right. So yeah, this is the Blue Beetle trailer, which came out this week. Well, yeah, this week. So shall we? I feel just bananas should work, right?
Yeah, I can't think of any
Scarab?
context. Scarab doesn't sound right.
Yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah, just banana, I
Okay.
suppose. But Or actually, given the one line, I suppose we could go Bat Nana.
I feel like for this one we shouldn't.
Okay, Banana.
Banana.
Excuse me, Mr. Reyes? You finished scraping the gum off that lounger or what?
Everything right now feels so out of reach.
You always land on your feet, bro. You're Jaime.
They don't know that much.
I dig this. So far, first 20 seconds.
He is a little bit older than I would want Jaime to be, though. To be fair,
Still good casting though, because he's actually like a really great actor from what I've seen.
like, yeah, no, I'm not super upset about it. I just wish that Jaime was actually a teenager. I think this guy is now in his like early 20s.
Yeah, fair. I mean, he still looks young enough.
I guess Shazam absorbed all the good child actors. There aren't any more good child actors to be had in Hollywood.
But I'm digging how I'm digging the aesthetic and just the kind of tone this movie's going for. Like it's not.
Yeah, no, it's definitely lighthearted. It's gonna bomb anyway because James Gunn as much as said that everything before Superman Legacy doesn't matter. But que sera sera.
Wait, wouldn't that also qualify his Creature Commando series? And the Amanda Waller series?
Well, everything before Superman Legacy and Creature Commandos doesn't matter to the wider DC. Also, people are mad enough at James Gunn that they essentially want to punish DC in order to punish him by proxy. So, like either way, this doesn't work. Either it does connect to James Gunn's DCU, which means that they want to punish it for that, or it doesn't matter until Superman Legacy and Creature Commandos, in which case they want to punish it for that. So either way, no matter how good this movie looks, I'm afraid it's gonna bomb.
Right. But I also think that it is like set in like pseudo Florida or something, like just the color and vibrancy.
I don't know where it's set. I wanted to say Arizona, but I may be wrong.
Well, it's said earlier when they did a transition. Hold on. Palmera City.
Okay.
Basically, I'm just thinking the DC version of Miami because it basically looks like that.
That's possible. Or it might be somewhere in New Mexico. Who knows? Anyway.
It has
yeah. And New Mexico is like right next door to the Gulf of Mexico. So yeah. But anyway.
Okay, see, before anyone wants to say something in the comments, I'm Mexican and don't get the pass, even though he said something that was kind of racist.
I'm just thinking in terms of because his family is also like Hispanic, so I can't imagine
Mexico, huh?
I can't imagine it being randomly set in Florida for no reason. Then again, why the fuck wasn't Billy Batson in Fawcett City instead of Philadelphia? So who the fuck knows? DC clearly isn't paying attention anymore.
Giving you the evil eye right now, man.
I know.
But yeah, no. I dig just this just seems like a fun movie so far. Just from like 20 seconds
it does. It's a shame it's gonna bomb regardless, unfortunately. But yeah, it looks good. It's gonna be one in 5 years or so. It's gonna be one of those hidden gems, and everyone will be going, "Hey, remember Blue Beetle?" But yeah, it's probably gonna bomb regardless.
Yeah. Anyway. No. Well, actually, Giant Turtle suggested Blue Nanas.
I suppose given the like Hispanic vibe, we could say plantains.
So you just can't help being racist at this point, can you?
What? Like it's a majority Spanish movie. What? And bananas are basically South American, or plantains are basically South American bananas. What? I'm not supposed to make that connection.
Fair enough. I mean, I don't know what the fuck a plantain is. I think you forget that I am I'm Middle West American.
Yeah, you're randomly in Indiana for no reason. Yeah, I know. But yeah, plantains are basically um like Central or South American savory bananas. Like they're less sweet than ordinary bananas, and usually people fry them. You
Anyway,
usually with chili powder, which actually I hear is supposed to be really good. I've never had a plantain, but from what I hear, they're supposed to be tasty. But anyway, plantains.
plantains.
What? But you know, you went in to get a shot, and now you got back with the hamburger.
Okay, I don't think it's a burger.
You haven't looked.
What the hell is it?
How did you get to do that?
Yeah, I just love how like colorful. Like I'm so used to things being so desaturated and mute that just any pops of color are just
Yeah, Hollywood. We've had the color movie for like 90 years now. You can use color now.
yeah.
But minor fanboy gripe. I'm a bit annoyed that there's no Ted Cord. I'm a bit annoyed that they didn't tie in Naboo or Hector Hall into this. Because Dr. Fate, Hawkman, and the Scarab all basically come from the same area in ancient Egypt, so they could have easily. But again, I am fully aware that this is a meaningless fanboy gripe, and that nobody but me remembers remembers Ted Cord, and nobody remembers that
Ted,
that it was Naboo that put the hex on the Scarab that made it lie dormant for several thousand years. But never mind.
Ted Cord is supposed to be in here. I remember hearing about that.
Well, we don't see him in the trailers, so I don't know. But I'm what I'm saying is I'm curious if they're gonna make the ancient Egypt connection, or if they're just gonna completely ignore it.
Probably ignore it, just because that. I'm not gonna lie, that is a bit. I want to say kind of too deep of lore, or a bit convoluted.
If they had left Black Adam as canon, they could have tied both Dr. Fate and Hawkman to it. But we never mind.
Was that also how it was no longer used to mind control the wielder, the spell?
Yeah, Naboo hexed it, and it lied dormant for several thousand years, and it also messed with the AI of the Reach AI from the Scarab and made it more benevolent. Because Naboo was just that badass back in the day. But nevertheless, like, if Black Adam was still canon, this would make perfect sense. Unfortunately, Black Adam is no longer canon because everything I love dies.
Anyway,
Like Mrs. Frickin' Turner from Fairly Odd Parents.
right?
Moving on.
Yeah.
I think he likes me. This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want.
See, the armoring up transition is awesome. I love this scene.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing someone mention like it was kind of body horror esque.
Yeah, it does have a bit of a body horror thing.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, I got nothing so far. Like, nothing really really to say so far because it is only like the first minute.
Yeah,
It's just cool.
it's fine. It's good. Unfortunately, I don't think it's gonna matter because Shazam 2 was also pretty freaking good and it bombed horribly. So I'm foreseeing a lot of bombs in DC's future. Not that it really could afford them anyway. I mean, DC has basically been on borrowed time since Man of Steel, and they haven't. They were almost out of the woods with stuff like Shazam and Black Adam and Wonder Woman and Aquaman, but whoops, none of that's canon anymore. Never mind.
I kind of want to bring up, and I hate doing this just because it makes me feel like I'm being kind of an egotist a bit. But you brought up Man of Steel, and I'm just reminded of the idea I came up with. Because okay, so full disclosure, because I cannot stop myself doing something creative and rewriting shit because it's a
He
fucking impulse with me for some
he
goddamn reason.
he really can't. Every time we talk, I I just quietly smirk at him, and then he goes, "Well, yeah, I did another thing," and then
That's my catchphrase at this point. I did the thing. That's my catchphrase at this fucking point.
and then I respond to him basically like Goku talking to Vegeta that one time. What did you do? And then he goes on for like 20 minutes about his newest idea. And then
Um,
I spend the intervening 2 hours basically bulletproofing it. And then whoops, we created another universe. This is the pattern.
so I'm revising the DCEU, like not fully rewriting it, but with a bit of hindsight and kind of thinking things out, reworking it within the guidelines of the actual movies to make them a little more cohesive, a little more competent, and a little more, I want to say, fun, more fun. But yeah, in the Man of Steel rewrite that I did, well, because with the hindsight of General Swanwick, who is the military guy in that, as Martian Manhunter, I introduced Martian Manhunter in Man of Steel. Uh, and I thought that would be super interesting. And given the kind of nature that the DCU took later on, specifically with like BVS and stuff, uh, if I had to fast track things, do that. I mean, I'm not
It
trying to.
also would have given Clark a freaking mentor, which he kind of desperately needed. But never mind.
Yeah, and I did change one major thing, and I'm sure like anyone who's a Superman fan here, present company included, of course, don't.
Mm-hmm.
I rewrote the scene with Zod and the family, and the neck snap scene. I rewrote that to one: the family that is in the corner isn't just staying there when they could obviously like run. They are trapped under rubble due to the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Two, Martian Manhunter psychic blasts Zod to the point where he's comatose.
Yeah, he gives him basically a psychic lobotomy.
Uh, yeah, I suppose that's it.
He 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 kind of pulls a Charles Xavier, which, to be fair, given Martian Manhunter, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. There's a lot more into. I'm going brief points, mind you, and there's a Reddit post. Yeah, because I posted on Reddit. Uh, it's in the Discord, like in the pitch room. Uh,
Which honestly, you know, something just occurred to me. Um, Assuming they still wanted to do a Superman versus the Authority movie someday, this would be an amazing way to th- this would be an amazing way to tie in what Superman does to Manchester Black when he's making his point to him at the end of Superman versus the Elite.
we do need more of Martian Manhunter, by the way.
For those that don't know, Manchester Black is basically telepathic John Constantine, and at the end of Superman versus the Elite, Superman fakes being more pragmatic for like 5 seconds, and he temporarily stuns the part of Manchester Black's brain that allows him to be a telepath, and it freaks him the fuck out because he thinks Superman lobotomized him when in actuality he just temporarily stunned that part of his brain.
Yeah, Drenchel, I agree. We need more Martian Manhunter.
Just in general, frankly,
Dude,
everything's better with Martian Manhunter. Seriously,
he is such an underutilized character. He is so cool and such an interesting, like, just so interesting.
yeah. I mean, for fuck's sake, the scenes between him and Dr. Fate in Justice League Unlimited episode The Return, it's freaking amazing.
Like,
also, one of the best moments in the entire run of Sandman is when he sees Dream for the first time. Oh my god. Why the fuck none of the DC shit made it into the Sandman adaptation for Netflix, I will never know, and I hate. But
sure. Okay, last thing before we move back to the trailer. I liked the scenes of Martian Manhunter in Zack Snyder's Justice League, although with his inclusion and the reveal that he is General Swanwick, it does bring up the question of why he never showed up before, which was never given.
Yeah, it's like, are you like Zod is here doing things, Clark needs a mentor, and Batman almost killed him. You want to do something there, John? Like anything at any point ever?
Right.
Nah, never mind.
Anyway.
Plantains.
What the?
Host acquired.
Who said that? Okay, it's gonna be okay.
Re-entry systems ready.
So I want to point out this is a practical suit. Like I've seen behind the scenes footage of this movie, and that is a practical suit enhanced by CGI.
Yeah, it's impressive that they did it practically. It's really a shame this movie is gonna bomb.
Yeah. It's a really cool looking suit. Like honestly, I love how well it translated from the comics to live action.
Yeah, no, they didn't cut corners on it either. This is basically what it's supposed to look like, which is cool.
Yeah. And again, I like how the tone. Honestly, I'm getting Spider-Man vibes from this, which is, I mean,
yeah, it's sort of Spider-Man meets Iron Man a little bit.
Yeah, but a good way, not MCU way.
I knew that was coming. I could feel it coming already. But also crazy.
I have made my stands on the MCU version of Peter Parker well known on this channel. All right. But yeah, I also like how it feels comic book like, just sort of like the shots and stuff. It like this movie. Like I'm talking about this.
I assume the villain is probably gonna be the Reach, just because why wouldn't you? I assume that the Scarab being activated is going to trigger the invasion, and therefore he's going to have to defend the Earth from the invasion of the Reach.
They are keeping it somewhat vague. I will admit that when I watched this trailer first.
Or at the very least, I would hope to God that's the premise. That if that isn't the premise, I'm going to be annoyed. Actually.
To be fair, they did make this before the whole announcement, so they might have wanted to build up to that. So
yeah, but it's gonna bomb regardless. So like I'm sad now that if that's not the premise, I'm gonna be extra annoyed because they're never gonna get a chance to do a sequel.
Anyway,
Why the fuck did you release the announcement video before any of these movies came out, James? Also, why did you only release half of the phase?
Anyway, shall we?
Moving on. Yeah, plantains.
Plantains.
This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want. This ain't what you want. Oh. What is going on? I just want to.
It's called the Scarab. It's some kind of world-destroying weapon. It's designed to protect its host.
This ain't what you want.
This is cool, man. I dig this. Now
I love that his eyes are actually yellow because in most movies where the eyes of the character are obscured in some way, they always change it. I'm glad they didn't skimp out on this because the color of the scarab's eyes are very important to the character. So like
I mean, I always thought it was red. Like I've seen most depictions as red eyes.
I've always seen them as like that same yellow bronzish color. Like that was the way it was in Batman the Brave and the Bold. That was that way in Young Justice.
It was red. Young Justice was. Maybe I might be fucking. I don't know. I might be colorblind or something.
I'm thinking you were because I don't remember them being red.
I know for a fact the Blue Beetle of Batman the Brave and the Bold had red eyes with like yellow slits, like eye slits, like cat-like things.
Mm.
Like I swear to God.
Okay, well maybe I'm forgetting then, but most of the portrayals I've seen have had that kind of yellow bronzish color, so I'm glad that they didn't skimp. Because they very easily could have just made them clear lenses or just made his eyes visible or some shit. But no, they gave him his eyes.
Right. I mean, I think the thing
which is more than the Netflix Sandman adaptation did. I know I'm not ever gonna let that go.
The thing I do hope is that they're willing to keep the actor in the costume and not do the whole Spider-Man or other superhero thing of like letting the actor take the mask off all the
Yeah, as much as I enjoy Dr. Fate and as much as it kind of made sense for his character to constantly be removing the helm in the context of the movie and stuff, I kind of wish they had just let him be Dr. Fate in that, like, as in, because Dr. Fate wearing the helm is very much the point. So, like, not in the possession retcon sense, because fuck the possession retcon, but like part of what allows Dr. Fate to strike the wise old wizard figure is that you don't really see his face.
Okay.
But never mind.
I mean, the actor is capable, from what I understand. Well, he plays Miguel. I'm not gonna say his name because I know I'm gonna fuck it up. He plays Miguel in Cobra Kai, and he has studied martial arts, I believe, and thus is capable of physical performance.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how much of that body horror scene of the suit up was his physical performance, and they just like built the armor around him, basically.
Dragon Toll looked it up. Batman Brave and the Bold had Blue Beetle with red eyes, but with yellow pupils.
Mm.
Okay, so we were kind of both right, I guess.
Yep, that tends to be the case. Anyway, moving along though.
Right.
Plantains.
Plantains.
Sometimes it does what you want, and sometimes it doesn't. I think I cut a bus in half.
The scarab chose you, but it belongs to me.
Hello, thing for your family. Makes you weak.
Okay, so this bitch is gonna be the villain instead of the Reach for some reason. And I'm sorry, dear, but the Scarab chose who the Scarab chose. You don't get a vote. Like, you can't. Like, I don't. I don't know what impetus this is going from of like it chose you but it belongs to me. No, if it belonged to you it would have picked you. Fuck off. Like this isn't even up for discussion.
Also, I want to point this out. I love the song because I actually like looked up the song. It's like a good like teen superhero song. This kind of gets you amped. I mean, I know it's not your type of music, Dom.
I was gonna say it didn't have any effect like that on me, but fine, I guess.
Yeah, well, you like boring music.
I like dignified music. Thank you very much.
Fuck off. Fuck
No.
off. Fuck off with that shit.
Some of us are thugs, man. Some of us are thugs.
So now that was kind of racist.
No, it has nothing. It has nothing to do with race. If anything, I was being classist just then, because
We're the-
because you.
We're in the
because
same-
you-
we are both middle class, you jackass.
Yeah, but you, according to you, live in the white ghetto, unquote. I live in a rural. I live in a rural enough area where I can still live a pretty decent life on what would anywhere else be a fairly poor financial context. So that's the difference. For as much as it annoys me that I live in the middle of freaking nowhere, living in the middle of freaking nowhere has its advantages. A dollar stretches a bit further here than it does other places. Whereas you, according to you, live in the white ghetto.
Whatever. I still think your taste in music suck.
Yeah, well, the feeling's mutual.
At least I have diverse musical taste.
It's not my fault. Good music stopped being produced in the 80s, for the most part.
Clearly, you're not looking in the right places, jackass. Anyway, plantains.
Plantains.
The universe has sent you a gift, and you have to figure out what you're gonna do with it. That's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Whatever you can imagine, I can create.
So, I like how it does say it basically gives a responsibility speech without like, saying great power comes great responsibility thing, right?
Where was the responsibility speech? I didn't catch it.
The universe gave you a gift. It's hold on. It happens quick, I will admit that, but universe has sent you a gift, and you have to figure out what you're going to do with it.
I guess kind of that fits the power responsibility mold. I don't know how I feel about the Scarab being female. Like I always preferred how it was handled in Batman the Brave and the Bold, where it basically functioned like a pet.
Giant Turtle, he hates metal.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of metal. Soft metal is one thing. If it gets to like scream metal, I tune out entirely. Same thing with rap.
Yeah, honestly, the type of metal I listen to is like power metal or I guess glam rock metal or.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've committed heresy according to someone, and it won't be the last. Dragon Troll, either get the matches or shut the fuck up.
Classics like Metallica or Motorhead.
Yeah, I will say I really love God Was Never on Your Side by Motorhead. That I can listen to that song anytime, anywhere, and be happy.
Oh,
But
also,
for the most part, I avoid metal for the most part.
hello, it's Out Talking.
Hi, it's okay.
But yeah, again, I dig this. I do agree it's a bit weird. Because I think you and I both kind of depictions a lot of times it's the voice of it's more so talking like a subconscious thing using high nasal voice.
The voice is inside. It's interfacing with his head, and we as the audience don't really hear it.
Right. So
it's kind of like to use another reference. It's kind of like Ship from Ben 10.
Alien Force.
Plus, because I know how the internet thinks, the armor being female is going to create a lot of slash fic.
Shut the fuck up.
Jaime X armor is now going to be a thing because the armor is female.
Shut the fuck. Why you gotta do that, man? Why the fuck?
Because as I said, I know how the internet thinks. The armor being female is going to create a lot of fan fiction. Of course, the armor having a male voice would also create a lot of fan fiction, but it would at least be more of a stretch.
Okay, now we have just a full conversation. Anyway, let's finish this. Full-on conversation of music in the comments. What chat? All right. Anyway, shall we?
Plantains.
Plantains.
Let's party.
Nice choice.
It's like Batman stuff. Batman's a fascist.
You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you, DC? You couldn't just create a really good movie with a really good trailer. You had to find some way of pissing on your own fan base again.
So, I guess we'll talk about when we get into the article next.
Okay, here's the thing. Here's the upshot of the article we're about to get into is if we didn't live in a world where literally everything was called fascist at any given moment, there could actually be an intelligent storyline somewhere buried in that concept because of Batman's obsessive need to create contingencies for everything and his somewhat authoritarian tendencies and his reliance on himself tendencies. Like, you could actually make a meaningful argument for especially the Frank Miller version of Batman being fascist by way of his I need to control everything impulse. Like Brainstormer and I have for since we started discussing this maintained that Injustice would have been a better storyline if it was Batman at the heart of it rather than Superman. And I even recently came up with a good name for an Elseworlds of Injustice that would be Batman being the fallen character rather than Superman. The title I came up with was Batman Darkest Contingency because it actually sort of works with Batman's mannerisms. So him on his darkest day leaning towards like fascist tendencies wouldn't be out of the question. Unfortunately, we can't have an intelligent conversation about possibly Batman organically heading that way because it actually kind of aligns with his philosophies and things. Or at the very least would be the result of his Joker-esque one bad day sort of thing. We can't have that intelligent conversation because fascism is the bane of everything's existence nowadays. And all the fan base just heard was, you called the most popular DC character in the world a fascist for more or less no reason. Because you didn't mention the everything must be contingencies thing. You didn't mention the occasionally self-reliant to the point of being authoritarian thing. You didn't mention the trauma. You didn't mention any of the things that could actually make that an intelligent thing to say. You just had to pull a, oh, by the way, that character you all love, he's a fascist because we say so.
Right. Okay, so Giant Turtle, I just call that authoritarianism, probably totalitarian. Fascism is basically worship where the nation state is held as the highest good and everything is subordinate to it.
Yes, and that would be a thing that would naturally extend from Batman's everything must be within my contingencies thing. Like, he is that controlling that if he basically pulled the Lex Luthor, and as we discussed last week, there are a lot of circumstantial similarities between Batman and Lex Luthor. If he pulled the Lex Luthor and decided to run for office, how long do you think he would be using that level of contingency on his citizenry? That's why I don't think it's an unintelligent thing to say that Batman might actually have some kind of like in a way that Giovanni Gentile would consider fascist. You could actually make an argument to Batman in his darker moments leaning towards that direction. Double especially the Frank Miller incarnation.
Right.
But we can't have the intelligent conversation because it's basically there just to incense the fan base. As though the fan base needed another thing to be incensed about.
So, Giant Turtle, we also don't trust them not to make Batman not a World War II baddie.
Again, it kind of is sad because this is one case where I'm kind of leaning towards maybe, like, in terms of the is Batman a fascist or not question. Like, on his worst day, yeah, probably. Would be an intelligent thing this would be an intelligent thing to explore in the storyline. And again, like, maybe, like, do injustice, but with Batman instead of Superman. And you basically would have Batism, basically. Ching.
All right, so
But we can't have the conversation about what the word fascism actually means in the sense that, like, Giovanni Gentile would be happy with, because we're too busy using fascism as a synonym for every authoritarian thing we don't like.
no, okay, so sorry you haven't covered your stuff, so there's just a lot. Okay. Well, literally only comes out in literally. Okay, hold on. Okay. Okay. Let me see. You have something to say. It's something that you didn't really see when it first came out. After it says we have had a few dozen Superman go too far. Batman's own rule is that he doesn't kill, and if he did kill, he would have started a lot earlier. He didn't even kill the Joker after he killed Robin. The only times Batman literally killed the Joker with his own two hands has been in a terrible episode of Titans in terms of mainstream stuff. And it is in his real world, not his make-believe concept is authoritarian in nature.
Yeah, both communism and fascism are authoritarian by nature. In fact, Mussolini and Giovanni Gentile basically proposed fascism to be perfected communism.
Right.
But nobody ever wants to address that point.
So before we move on to the article, I do want to mention like some other high points of this trailer, which was the Buster Sword that Blue Beetle formed. So we forgot to mention that. The big sword. Do you know what a Buster Sword is, Dalton?
No.
Final Fantasy VII, Cloud Strife.
Oh.
Jesus Christ. I know that. I actually never played the games.
I only ever played one Final Fantasy.
Okay.
It was the island themed one with Sin as the villain. I don't know which one that was.
I pseudo played. Pseudo fantasy Final Fantasy game. I played Kingdom Hearts, both of them, like the first two when they came out.
I remember when the first one came out, but I personally never played it. I've watched a lot of walkthroughs and let's plays of it though, to be fair.
Right. But
Anyway, moving forward.
I was going to mention that again. It looks like a good movie. I think people are focusing on like the wrong thing, obviously, and we'll get more into that as we get into the next article.
Again, it's the fact that they couldn't just make a good movie trailer or a good movie and leave well enough alone. They had to find some way of committing an optics fail at the last second.
Well, I also want to mention this. It's because everyone just seems to jump on the thing and like videos I've seen, well, not seen, but seen like the thumbnails and stuff of like the trashing it. I guess again, I haven't checked out those videos. So I just don't care.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of proposes that Blue Beetle is the one who's saying that phrase when it's a side character being played by George Lopez.
Right, but I don't like. Nevertheless, that line shouldn't exist.
No,
I don't care.
Like read it. I just want the full. I personally just want the full context to be stated, just so like we have that.
Right. I know it was. I know it wasn't him, but for all intents and purposes, not only does that line exist in the movie, but it exists in the trailer, which means that someone somewhere at Warner Brothers wanted everyone to see that as though it were a selling point of the movie. Which says to me that once again, they could have just made a half decent Blue Beetle movie, and it probably still wouldn't have done well because of the way James Gunn has handled things. But it at the very least would have been an inoffensive kind of not done well. As in, like it fails despite itself rather than because of itself. But now, in addition to all the other bullshit that DC is pulling recently, what little hope that people had that Blue Beetle would be decent is now tainted with, and oh, by the way, the most popular DC character in the world, we're calling him fascist. No reason, we just decided to be topical dickheads.
Anyway, shall we?
Yep, moving on.
This is from /film.com. Blue Beetle's Batman is a fascist line isn't just a throwaway joke. Honestly, I kind of assumed it was overall.
Yeah, and see that's the thing. I still don't think it should have existed because the fan base is already pissed off at you enough. You don't. There comes a point where you need to stop poking the goddamn bear, but they couldn't help themselves. But even then, according to the creatives behind the line, it's not just the throwaway line, and that's what makes me cringe because the movie as it was presented right up until that line, that movie I would want to see, but in the context of that line existing and in the context of that isn't just a throwaway joke, it's something that the writers actually believe. Yeah, no, the movie can go fuck itself now. I was on team I'm sorry that Blue Beetle will bomb, and now I'm no longer on that team. I'm kind of on the team of, well, you kind of deserve it now. You made your bed, now lie in it, kind of thing. Because you couldn't read the room. You couldn't leave well enough alone. You had to poke the bear again for no reason. And it's that pathological.
Dawn, you're muted.
Hello?
Yeah. I think you might have hit the mute button, like the mute button on your thing.
Ah, I see. What I was saying was it's the pathological failure to read the room thing that bothers me more than anything. The fact that they can't give it 5 minutes to let their fan base cool off. They have to find a new way to piss them off again for no reason. It bothers me more than anything because it's like if you just would shut the fuck up for 5 minutes and let your fan base cool off, or at least stop pissing them off long enough for them to get over it, you'd be doing okay. But they won't. They won't just leave well enough alone. Like this is the perfect example. They could have just completely edited out that scene and then presumably also edited it out of the movie, and no one would have been the wiser. But not only did that scene have to make it into the movie, thereby pissing people off, but it also was apparently so important that you put it in the frickin' trailer, as though DC fans weren't already pissed off at you.
Okay, so yeah, so I read the thing where apparently the actress who's playing the villain said that her character is supposed to be a portrayal of the white American military industrial complex.
Now I feel less bad that Blue Beetle's gonna bomb. Like it was gonna bomb regardless. Like make no mistake, even without this line, this movie would bomb because of the way James Gunn has handled things. But with this line, I no longer feel bad that this movie is gonna bomb. I kind of am like, well, you get what you pay for. Or to quote another DC character, you get what you fucking deserve.
Honestly, the line could have worked better if George Lopez said, Batman's a control freak.
Even that's overly confrontational, because for better or worse, Batman is the most popular DC character.
Okay, well,
So
I don't give a shit. It's better than saying he's a fascist.
I mean, it's better than saying a fascist, but it didn't go. It could have gone without being said. Period. The most that could be reasonably considered neutral is Batman is weird or something like that, or Batman is crazy or something. That would have actually come off as a joke. But putting anything specific in there related to Batman's negative qualities can't be taken entirely as a joke. Calling him a control freak, calling him a fascist, calling him whatever, it once again gives your fan base another thing to be pissed off about. And it's not like they had a shortage of things to be pissed off about before.
Anyway, we got it.
Yep, moving on.
All right, so this was written by Valerie Ettenhofer. If I was saying that wrong, I'm sorry. It's published April 3rd, 2023. Okay. First trailer for Blue Beetle is here, and while the latest superhero movie from DC and Warner Brothers is set to serve as an origin story for a young hero, Jaime as Blue Beetle, his name isn't exactly as well known as Batman or Superman. The movie already looks like it's got some fighting words for DC's big guys, or at least Jaime's Uncle Rudy, played by George Lopez, does. Splash Films' Jenna Birch attended the trailer launch event for Blue Beetle with director Angel Manuel Soto and star Zolo Maduena. I think that's how you say his name. Again, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. In attendance. There, Cobra Kai star Maradona spoke about the ways in which Blue Beetle may or may not intersect with the larger DC universe, particularly when it comes to Rudy's declaration that Batman is a fascist. Can't
This
reveal
again
it.
implies that whether this was a one-off joke or not, this is something that the writer actually considers. Which again, in a sane world, a world where fascism wasn't evoked at the drop of a freaking hat, I could actually see the argument. I could see the argument of his strongman tendencies, his self-reliant tendencies, and his I need to control everything contingency tendencies could lead him to something resembling fascism as Giovanni Gentile would have actually defined it. Something that the people who espoused fascism back when it was espousable actually would recognize as fascist. Not just anything authoritarian we don't like, but in a way that would actually be a meaningful conversation. And you could even do a storyline, an Elseworld story, basically Injustice, but Batman instead of Superman, where Batman's paranoia and contingency happiness goes to the point of basically creating a police state. Like, you could have done that. You could have done Bat Fascist in an intelligent way. Because it's not without merit. But in a context where fascism is used at the drop of a hat and is used majoritarily just to mean anything authoritarian or militaristic we don't like, and with no deference whatsoever to what Mussolini or Giovanni Gentile actually thought about the matter, it literally just seems like you're morally invalidating Batman and pissing off your fan base in the process. And I have to wonder just how many more ways, DC and James Gunn in particular, are you going to aspire to piss off your fan base before you realize that may have been a not so good idea? Just saying, it's not like they didn't already have 5 or 6 different reasons to be pissed off at you, and you just gave them another one. Like, Blue Beetle wouldn't have done well regardless. It would have flown under the radar regardless. But at the very least, it would have been a shame that it bombed. And now people are actively rooting for it to bomb because of this bullshit. Moving on.
Okay. I can't reveal if more superheroes are mentioned, but the Batman one is obviously in the trailer. Zoro shared, or again, I can't say his last name, so. And I think we will explain certain superheroes and opinions through the eyes of the family. And clarified that just because a hero is named dropped in the movie, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to show up. Either it sounds like the Reyes family, or some honest takes on the hero that, at least in the case of Rudy's Batman comment, may not be particularly flattering.
Okay, Dragon Turtle. Okay, you got me. Fair enough. Fair enough. That's. But in practical terms, no, Dragon Turtle. I'm not wanting to bat the Fash. I'm wanting to admit that the bat might already be Fash. Is what I'm getting at. And no, I don't mean that in the ew everything I don't like or is immoral kind of way. I mean in a meaningful sense, in like an Elseworld story. Again, think of Injustice, but Batman instead of Superman. You could actually see a, sort of darkest timeline version of Batman whose paranoia, trauma, and contingency for everything tendencies lead him to basically create an Orwellian police state where he was actually something resembling a fascist dictator. And that would be an actually really cool, really dark, sort of twisted timeline to do if you wanted to do that as an Elseworld. But we can't do that in a context where fascism just means, in common parlance, anything authoritarian or moralistic or militaristic that I don't like.
So, should I reread the thing again? Or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. can't reveal if more superheroes are mentioned, but the Batman one is obviously in the trailer. Meredith not shared. And I think we will experience certain superheroes and opinions through the eyes of the family. The actor clarified that just because a hero is name dropped in the movie, it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to show up. Rather, it sounds like the Reyes family will have some honest takes on the heroes that, at least in the case of Rudy's Batman comment, may not be particularly flattering. So, it's the side characters' views of the world of DC. I mean, it's still stupid, obviously, the comment, but at least somewhat, I get that somewhat.
Mm-hmm. Ahsoka, I'm not saying Bruce Wayne would need to run for office. If anything, I'm thinking it would be like it is in The Dark Knight Returns, and he would, instead of stopping his takeover of things at the border of Gotham, he just eventually takes over the whole world, or at the very least America. Like that's the way I'm thinking it works. I'm thinking he uses all those paranoid conspiracy, the paranoid contingencies of his to basically enslave everyone in a police state governed by Batman, basically. Because once he takes out all the Justice Leaguers, with all of his resources, who's left to oppose him? If he uses his contingencies to take out all the Justice Leaguers and then proceeds to take over the rest of the country, we are living in Batistan population 1.
Batistan? Really?
Yes.
Okay, moving on. Funny as it is, Mother said the Rudy character, the uncle character, George Lopez's character, has, I think, a really interesting arc that relates to his hot take on Batman. You're going to witness what someone like Rudy thinks about Batman, and you're going to see what someone like Jaime thinks about these characters. Medina continued referencing the teen hero he played in the film. I think he contextualizes it in a way that feels honest to these characters. Okay, I mean, if it's part of his character arc,
it depends on which way the character arc is pointing.
Yeah, that's true.
Honestly, for me, because there are two ways I could see this going. There's the way I would prefer it to go, which is the uncle realizes he doesn't know shit about these characters and retracts that statement, in which case it was still a bad idea to put it in the frickin' trailer, because out of context it looks as though you're trying to soapbox. Or option 2, which is the depressingly likely option, which is Jaime's naive about these characters, and by the end of the movie realizes that they are authoritarian and that someone like Batman is a fascist. Like that is also a way I could see this going based on modern Hollywood logic. And I really, really don't want the asshole comment made by George Lopez's character to be vindicated in the movie. But I have kind of a terrible feeling that it might end up being the case where Jaime was childishly naive and needs to be brought down to the quote-unquote real world of peg, and therefore will become cynical by the end. Because I could see it happening. I don't want it to happen, but it seems likely.
Jesus Christ, you're cynical.
How many times do we have to see that exact storyline of the naive innocent person was wrong to be naive and innocent, and the cynical person was correct to be paranoid, before I'm justified in pointing out that Hollywood likes to do that storyline?
10 more times. 10 more times.
I'm gonna hold you to that. At every single one of those times, I'm gonna say I told you so. And by the way, if it turns out that's the route they go with Jaime in the new Blue Beetle, I'm saying I told you so.
Okay, then I'll accept that and I'll kindly eat my words, okay? I'm not overly optimistic. I'm just being cautious. I'm just trying to be somewhat optimistic. Someone has to be.
I know, but it's not that I can't imagine a world in which they do the other one, but I'm just at the point where it's like, when have I ever been that lucky? I've tried giving people benefit of the doubt. I've tried giving them writing outs. I've tried to meet them halfway, and they keep spitting in my face for trying. I'm getting sick of it.
Anyway, you know,
Moving on.
the hero's journey is one that's different than Batman, and that hero's journey is one that's different than Batman and Superman. First ever DC film to star a Latino actor, Blue Beetle will feature a family that co-star Harvey Gulen previously said feels authentic and welcoming. If you're part of the Latino community, you're going to feel like, oh my gosh, my culture is on screen. That is how I talk at home. Oh, fuck off.
Identities are not teams or hive minds. Piss all the way off,
That's
please.
still here. Don't give a shit about that. I just want a really cool character to be represented on fucking screen well.
Yeah, those of us that like Jaime because of who Jaime is as an individual character.
Oh, he hasn't really been much shine in the recent years.
I mean,
My knowledge, at least.
yeah, I mean, he was pretty central to the Reach storyline in Young Justice
Right, but that was
for
almost
obvious reasons.
that was over a decade ago, though.
Has it seriously been that long?
Yeah, like Young Justice came out in 2012. Season 2 was about 2013, 14, so a decade.
Jesus Christ, I feel old.
You should.
Yes, thank you. Fuck you, you young bastard, you.
You were gonna say whippersnapper, weren't you?
Get the fuck out of my head.
No, it's just you say that all. You've said that so many times before. I just know you're gonna say it.
These kids today, no respect for their elders, I tell you what.
Hey, where I come from, respect is earned, regardless of age.
Oh ho! And I haven't earned any respect from you over the course of the 4 years we've known each other. That's a nice thing to say to someone you consider to be your best friend.
No, you have my respect for pretty much everything except your age. Anyway, where was I?
My culture on screen is the last thing you said.
Yeah, that is how we talk at home. Go and told / film last December. In Uncle Rudy's case, played by George Lopez. That means calling out the Cape Crusader, who, to be fair, does hoard wealth, enforce a hyper-violent criminal justice system, and sometimes dabbles in NSA-like surveillance. Okay, that last one, he does do that sometimes.
And by the way, here is where I'm deploying the "I told you so" because the writers just justified his bullshit. They didn't say he would grow beyond it or learn that he was wrong about it. They claimed that he was correct for thinking that.
That's
so the "I told you so."
But they could be just talking out their asses. I at least want to wait until the movie itself.
I mean, they made the damn thing. Presumably, they know what they. Presumably, they made the thing and then are talking about what they made.
I really just want to enjoy this movie. God damn it. Actually, I might be Team Rooney on this one. That's the last line of that paragraph.
And again, in a sane world, we could talk about how Bruce's trauma and his obsession with contingencies and his self-reliance to the point of authoritarianism tendencies would lead him quite easily into something like fascism if he had a Joker-style one bad day. Like, we could have that conversation. It would be a very dark, very serious Elseworld story someone could do. But that's not what they mean when they say fascist. In fact, no one in Hollywood seems to know what they mean when they say fascist. They've never read Giovanni Gentile or My Rise and Fall, Mussolini's own autobiography. They've never actually let people who know or understand fascism define fascism. The most people will do, for some fucking reason, is Umberto Eco's definition, and Umberto Eco's definition is so biased and embittered by his own personal bullshit, and so broad as to be a non-definition. Like, it applies to literally everything. So, I wish we could. I wish it was still the 90s. I wish it was still like this would be a good storyline for someone like Alan Moore to do if if it was like 1980s Alan Moore who wasn't so far up his own ass as he is now. Like, I could actually see a again. I'm going with the title that I came up with, Batman Darkest Contingency. I could see like an Elseworlds version of Injustice where Batman uses instead of Superman using his powers, it's Batman using all his prep work to basically create a police state in either America or more likely in the entire world. Like, that would be a cool dystopian DC storyline. But we can't have that conversation, the conversation where we actually use fascism as it's actually supposed to be frickin' defined, because we're too busy calling fascism literally anything we don't like that is too militaristic and authoritarian.
So, moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Zolo Maradina put it a little more kindly at the trailer premiere and also related the Batman critique back to the point of Blue Beetle, as he explained. I might think Batman is super cool, but at the heart of it, maybe what Batman stands for is a bit flawed. The actor said that Blue Beetle gets to create our version of what we feel superhero is, albeit different from Superman, who has no fears and who is the guy in the face of no matter what will get the job done. Steady points out we're being a person who also almost at the beginning doesn't want this destiny and is resistant to his calling.
See, read that again. I didn't catch most of that. I don't know if you were too far away from your mic or if you were just talking too softly.
Zolo Mazardina put it a little more kindly at their trailer premiere and also related the Batman critique back to the point of Blue Beetle. As he explained, Jaime might think Superman is super cool, but at the heart of it, maybe what Batman stands for is a bit flawed. The actor said that Blue Beetle gets to create our own vision of what we feel a superhero is, albeit different from Superman, who has no fears and who is the guy in the face of no matter what will get the job done. Instead, he points out we're meeting a person who, almost at the beginning, doesn't want this destiny and is resistant to his calling.
I don't know how to say his name.
Zolo.
Zolo, sir. You're not describing anything new. You're describing a basic hero's journey. Hero hears call to adventure, momentarily avoids call to adventure, is forced into call to adventure anyway. Like, that's hero's journey 101 type shit. Like, this isn't new at all.
Moving on?
Yep, moving on.
Okay. That hero's journey is one that's different from Batman and Superman, but is unique and special in its own regard. Majordina, I don't know how you say his last name, says of Jaime Reyes' path to become Blue Beetle.
I mean, again, it feels like just yet another case of DC fails to read the room. You could have just left it out. You could have just not made it a thing, and instead, you could have just let people cool off, let people calm down from all the things they're angry about. But instead, you just added another little thing for them to be angry about. And come come later this year when it comes out, my money, I would bet dollars to donuts that you're gonna be surprised when Blue Beetle massively underperforms and bombs.
Right. So kind of ending on somewhat, although the weird discussion for me, Dolan. A positive note. I hope so, at least. So Don has made his gripes known.
Yeah, John Wick 4.
Yeah, review of John Wick Chapter 4, because I saw that on Monday with my uncle. So I guess we'll just do our standard thing of like general thoughts first, then we'll start getting more in things and then kind of give, just kind of go more in depth with spoilers and stuff. So,
yeah.
So you want to start or should I?
I'll start.
Okay.
John Wick is one of the most consistent franchises ever in the sense that you could seriously make an argument for every single one of the John Wick movies being the best of the four, and I couldn't, in good conscience, disagree with you entirely. Like every movie has something in particular to recommend it, and John Wick 4 is no different. Like it does have the distinct benefit of being the biggest and the most over the top, though, which will always be of benefit to me because I always operate on the assumption of be the best, most epic version of whatever it is you're trying to be, and I think John Wick 4 definitely does that. I have my criticisms of it. I definitely have my criticisms of it, and we'll get into that more when we get into spoilers. But apart from those few criticisms, which don't even really come to play until the end, I freaking love this movie.
Oh yeah, no, I basically I do agree with everything Dalton said, minus the critiques he has towards the end. I really enjoy this movie. My uncle actually said that this might have been the best out of all four movies. I don't know about that. I think like 3 is kind of still my favorite to me.
See, that's the thing. Like I say, every single one of them could potentially be the best one.
Yeah.
And it's genuinely like a coin flip, basically, as to which one is the best one.
I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. There was not a moment. I mean, there was like maybe 1 or 2 moments I was not there for, mainly because I had to use the restroom.
Mm.
Yeah, spoiler alert, don't drink a lot of water when you're watching the trailers. Yeah, and I'm drinking a lot of water now, or trying to. I'm trying to cut down on soda.
Good for you.
I don't know if it's gonna stick.
Mm.
But yeah, I'll keep trying. So to kind of get into technical aspects, not really like spoiling anything, but it's me and I like to talk about the technical stuff. This is a very colorful movie. And I don't even just mean like in the actual color grading, but just the locations, the set designs,
as usual, the director knows how to use visuals properly, unlike a lot of action movies.
Hell, even the characters you could describe as colorful, which, yeah, there really isn't like a wasted. Well, okay. Well, I'll get more into that specifically when we get into spoiler stuff, but it's a very enjoyable movie, and it's masterfully well made. Like, honestly, I think people have said that the John Wick franchise has effectively revitalized the action genre, and that is not up for debate at all.
I honestly wish they would give Chad Stahelski the rights to do James Bond, because he's one of the only people I trust at this point to do James Bond in any way like well. because James Bond has recently lost a lot of its pulpiness, and I think that Chad Stahelski could help bring that sort of pulp, like gadgets and gizmos and stuff, back into the James Bond lore.
Right. I would say Kingsman did a lot of like. I mean, that wasn't made by those guys, mind you. But sorry, a little side tangent. Was a good.
I mean, the problem with Kingsman is that it was almost like a parody of that, which.
That's fair. That is completely fair. I will say it still had those campy like stuff. Even if it was parody, it was still like very well made and good. I think.
I'd rather a more sincere version of it, and Chad Stahelski has shown that he can do that kind of old world grandeur without making it a joke. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I still like Kingsman though, just because I find it fun, a fun movie.
I actually like Kingsman 2 the best, but I feel like after that they kind of lost the plot a little bit. As cool as it was to see Rasputin in a Kingsman movie, the Kingsman was not that good.
I just meant Kingsman franchise overall, to be fair. Okay, so spoiler stuff. What do you want to start with? I guess.
I guess start at the end, because that's the point where we disagree the most.
Okay. Well, for spoiler. Okay, so spoiler alert if anyone hasn't seen it, and if you haven't seen it and you're watching this podcast,
there shall be spoilers. If you don't want spoilers, then go away now.
Yeah.
We will not be legally held accountable for the hurting of your butts.
That sounded weird. You phrased that really weird.
By which I mean don't get pissy and butt hurt over the whole thing.
Okay, so John Wick dies.
I think it's still kind of left open that he might have faked his own death, which I suppose is the only saving grace for it for me, but yeah.
Yeah, so don't we discussed this briefly on well, not Thursday, Friday.
Yeah, we couldn't do it on Thursday because Brainstormer was busy on Thursday, but we still did our weekly meetup thing, and when we did our weekly meetup thing, this became a topic of conversation for quite a lot of it.
I'd say roughly like 20 minutes, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We had other things to discuss, so. But, yeah, I mean, I don't mind the ending because to me, the John Wick franchise has always, like, the movies have always kind of come across as like a very tragedy kind of story.
I, however, thought it was building to John Wick topples the high table and either takes their place, and then dismantles it, or more likely, he gets to the point where he could take their place and decides to just walk away and have his happy ending with him and his dog. Or, as a third possible option, he topples the high table and dies in the process, and that would have been a much more fitting ending. Right. Unfortunately, though, spoiler alert, the high table is still in full force at the end of this movie, and I think it's a waste because A, Keanu basically could have made these movies until the day he died, and no one would have batted an eye. And B, the unresolved potential of John Wick pisses me off, and also the fact that it didn't even resolve in a bittersweet happy ending. It just randomly ended.
So, yeah, is that everything? Or
I mean, you can go now. Okay. I have more, but I'd rather phrase it in discussion form.
Okay. Well, for one thing, I respect the creators having the balls to be willing to kill off the main character. Mainly because most franchises these days are too scared and will either run it into the ground or just abandon it at some point.
See, I'm of the opposite opinion. I think that the
Don't-
downer ending of and then the main character died is far too common in this day and age. I think it would have been a much more risque, much more baller move to
Right.
have let something have a happy ending for once. Which for John is he walks away having dismantled the high table, and he does man and his dog things for the rest of his life.
This, I don't want to be like just could you please not interrupt me when I'm trying to.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm just. Fuck, I lost my train of thought. God damn it. Okay, so I will disagree with you that I don't think it's a dour ending. It's a bittersweet one, to me at least. Yes, John dies, but it was made very clear that he had nothing really to truly live for, except for like the memory of his wife, but even that wasn't really enough.
See, no, I disagree, because a bittersweet version of this would have been he topples the high table but dies in the process. That
Okay.
would have been the bittersweet version of this.
So may I,
Go ahead.
so just so I can explain this, just so you have the full context of how I see this as a bittersweet ending, like the actual ending, right?
Mm-hmm.
John dies in service to save his friends, people who have suffered because of his actions and the consequences of his actions. Because clearly it has been shown that he has lost, like some people have been killed, like rest in peace, Lance Reddick, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Because he did pass, I believe, sometime before John Wick Chapter 4 came out, or just after it came out.
It was a few days before it came out.
Right.
This was his last movie role, as far as anyone knows.
Yeah, great actor, by the way. It does suck that you know. But he lost those people, and because of that, he, not to mention the tribe he came from, like one of the families of the High Table. He lost someone who was very close to him. And again, like there were just the consequences of his actions, which he himself had not been facing, but those around him were, and he was more or less doing this to save them. And yeah, he was effectively, he was marked for death. But I also want to point out is that the High Table itself, which seems to be this very like criminal underworld Illuminati thing, eternal, almost mythical. John, while an impressive assassin, like one of the best out there, is still effectively a man. And he's been shown many times in these movies that he is human.
Yes, but he's also a myth, is the thing. If anyone under the service of the table nominally is going to be able to undo them, it's going to be John Wick.
Okay, that's fair. Like, again, I don't disagree with you effectively. I just think this is still it's a good enough ending that works for what it is, I think.
See, and again, I don't agree, because I see what you described as an entirely tragic ending. I don't see there to be any sweetness in it at all. A bittersweet ending would have been like he finds the high table where the high table is set up and kills them all in a similar manner to how number 5 from Umbrella Academy, I believe it was in season 2, dispatches the entire commission at the behest of the handler. But in the process, because it is a John Wick movie, he dies. That would have been a bittersweet ending. That way the high table doesn't exist anymore, but there's nothing to replace it either. So the world has to deal with what does the world look like now after both the high table itself and John Wick are dead. Like him dying in the process of dispatching the high table, that would have been the bittersweet version of this. The full stop happy ending version would have been he kills off the high table, survives just enough to retire, and goes off and does guy and his dog stuff for the remainder of his life. Because to me, his driving force from minute 1 of the movie was always, I just want to go home. I just want to relax with my dog. I just want out. That's always been his like driving force ever since his wife died, is I just want to live in peace. I just want to be left alone. I just want out. But of course, the world in which the world of the high table would never allow him to do that, and that's why you get Yosef Tarasov in the first movie, and then Santino D'Antonio being essentially the vessels of the high table's will that he not actually be able to get out. So what I always assumed this franchise was leading to is John struggles to stay as out as he can, keeps getting pulled back in until finally he has to actually kill the high table and thereby erase the world that the high table has built. And then and only then will he either A, get to rest, i.e. die, or B, get to retire, i.e. go off and do guy and his dog stuff in his old age.
Okay.
Like that would have been it. Also, I find it annoying because it's such an anticlimax to have him die this way. He doesn't die in One Last Blaze of Glory. He doesn't die to wipe out the table. He just dies randomly, and given the quasi mythical status of John Wick that has been built up in these movies, that is far more subversive than I'm entirely comfortable with. It feels like a rug pull at the last second, and both in and out of universe, I think Keanu Reeves could have done this. You could have essentially spun off 2 or 3 more of these, and no one would have batted an eye, and it could have finally ended with John. All the one-off foot soldiers are dispatched. Now it's just John, and it's the high table, and either you could have it be the bittersweet ending where they take out each other essentially, and then the world has to grow up. It has to deal with the consequences of neither John Wick nor the high table existing any longer, or the fully sweet ending, which is John destroys the high table, is offered the position to take their place as essentially the single remaining member of the high table, or and more likely, because it's John, he'd just say, no, you guys can sort it out yourselves, and then he goes off and does guy and his dog things.
Well, I'll be honest, Don. I don't think you're gonna change your mind. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I'm fine with the ending personally.
I find it to be a subversive anticlimax, and I I honestly think it's kind of pushing out to do it this way.
Okay, I to be fair, I think we're just going to be going in circles for like an hour if we keep talking about the ending.
Mhm.
So, because I do want to talk about like some other aspects of the film that I think we both really enjoyed.
Mhm.
Well, I guess you'll start because me, obviously, I'm going to talk about the characters. So,
Like I said, the biggest thing this movie has to recommend it is the scale. For me, it goes. It's probably the biggest and most epicified version, or the biggest and most epicified chapter in the entire series. It's a globe-trotting adventure, and it the stunts and fights are on a level that honestly put Fast and Furious movies to shame. It's also the longest, which I actually like because it allows both the action and the character stuff to breathe probably more than any of the other movies have.
right. Well, I guess I do want to mention. I do want to talk about the characters because holy shit, did like as much as the world is, I do think these movies also help are enhanced by the level of characters that are put in these movies.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of starting off with like uh, well the central antagonist I want to talk about, which was played by is it Peter Skarsgård or is it one of the Skarsgård kids? I know that, but
It was Bill,
Bill Skarsgård, yeah,
same guy who played same guy who played Pennywise in the most recent It.
movies, and also did a cameo role in Deadpool 2 when he was part of X Force.
Was Bill Skarsgård in Deadpool 2? I didn't notice that.
Yeah, he was part of the X Force team that got killed early on. Had the acidic vomit thing.
Huh.
Can't remember the character's name, but yeah, that was him.
I don't think he was credited then. Damn.
I'm more surprised you didn't. Well, to be fair, I'm sure you've only seen him in like the Pennywise clothing. Like,
Yeah, I've only really seen him in It and then this movie.
okay. I mean, Bill Skarsgård is a great actor. Like all the actors that are in these movies are always great.
I mean, they're great and they're also kind of perfect for their roles.
Yeah.
Although I will say
Can
the villain is one of the few areas where I feel like this movie was weaker than some of the other ones.
No, I agree, but
I really liked the Adjudicator from Chapter 3.
so I'm not surprised. I'm really not surprised. That's your kind of character. That's you're not.
Uh-huh.
You are a plain simple bitch.
I like the Adjudicator, goddammit, leave me alone.
Yeah, I wonder why. But
I also really like the Bowery King, to be fair though.
yeah,
He's another one of my favorites.
I mean, Lawrence Fishburne is always a win.
I mean, yeah, but it's been a while since I've seen him in a role he's really owned and he really owns the Bowery. So
Right.
yeah.
So back to what I was saying. The Marquis de Romo, I think.
Hmm.
The Marquis.
For simplicity, just the Marquis.
Yeah. I mean, Bill Skarsgård. Although I kind of wish he did fight because I assumed he was fighting in some scenes in the trailers that I'd seen him in, and he had that kind of air about him that he was a fighter.
That being said, I do prefer characters that don't have to fight.
That's fair. still, he played his role of being like kind of just a fucking aristocratic piece of shit. Which I'm more surprised you are not a fan of that guy.
I mean, the Adjudicator kind of had that same vibe, and I think she pulled it off better.
Okay, yeah, all right. So Mr. Nobody, who is, I know the actor, but I can't remember his name. Fuck's sake, I've seen him in a few things, but he was interesting just because, like, he just struck me as a very, like, okay, here's the thing with like John Wick characters. They're always so, like, the world of John Wick always makes you want to like see more. Like, always want to know more. You know, like, it doesn't hold your hand or anything. It just puts you in the world. Give you little bits and pieces, right?
Am I the only one who has the fan theory that Winston is John's actual biological father?
Oh no, I thought that too when I saw the last scene and like the tattoo on Winston's wrist and what he said to John's grave and shit, man.
Yeah, there's absolutely, like, I've always, like, ever since the first movie, I've been suspicious of that. There's absolutely no way now I'm not entirely convinced that Winston is John's biological father.
As soon as I was seeing that, like as soon as I saw that and thinking about all the scenes before with them, it really did start to come like across.
Yeah, I either Winston is John's biological father, or no one knows who John's biological father is, and Winston is is like a surrogate father, like an adoptive father.
Well, he's supposed to be part of the same tribe or family that John is from. So if nothing else, they are related via that. But yeah, Mr. Nobody was interesting because he is a tracker or a bounty hunter who was supposed to be after. I like that he didn't outright go after John until like there was a higher enough price. Because that was interesting. Also, his pet dog. It was just, again, really interesting character, and I wish, and just a good foil to John as well, I think.
Also, Donnie Yen.
Kane.
Yeah, Donnie Yen's character, there's something to be said for just that level of badassery.
Also, like, he was kind of, I would argue that he was somewhat the comedic relief of this movie. Like, a little bit. Like, the scenes even when he was doing action scenes, there was a bit of, I'd say Jackie Chanism a bit.
Yeah, it was very drunken master sort of kung fu that he was doing. Yeah,
I mean, the guy was blind, so
yeah.
But he was so interesting because, like, again, it's the added layers of like the friendship with John and the fact that he is almost like he's like a John that if actually would have stayed true to the deal that he made with the High Table in Parabellum, the last movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I also like that he's never made out to be a straight up villain like the Marquis. Like, he generally doesn't want to do this, but he's doing it because he has, he has something.
That's the thing I love about John. Despite the fact that he's this big, scary,
boogeyman.
If you see the Baba Yaga coming, you're already dead, sort of thing. Like, despite the fact that he's that, every motherfucker that he comes into contact with ends up having a positive opinion of the dude because he might have the skills of the world's foremost assassin, but in actuality, he's just kind of a chill dude. Like, even the scene in the first movie when he corners the one guard, and the guard recognizes him and goes, are you working today, Mr. Wick? And John is like, I'm afraid so. Well, then I'm just gonna not be here tonight. And John just quietly is like, okay, fair enough, you're not here. Cool. Like, that level of decency that he, given John's skill set, he definitely doesn't have to abide by those rules, but He chooses to because he prefers it that way.
Yeah.
Something, which again is why I would prefer a either happy ending for him or a more cathartic. At least you died, getting rid of the entire high table.
Right.
Ending.
But yeah, it's just. I also want to mention this movie. Like, I think it's about 85% fight scenes, maybe even more.
Yeah, it's a fairly nonstop fight scene. But that being said, you will not regret a single moment of those like
So-
2.5 hours of fight scenes.
Dude, they are like. Never once has a fight scene in a John Wick movie ever been lacking.
Also, Paris. Paris is always a win.
Dude, the fighting. I loved how they got. Spoilers, by the way. They got a French cover version of Painted Black.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yep.
I literally listened to that on YouTube earlier today.
Yeah, you gotta love Painted Black. Every time Painted Black comes up, it's always so badass.
I thought you hated rock music.
No, I like soft 80s rock. Remember, I did mention earlier that music stopped being good pretty much in the 80s.
Well, let's agree to disagree on that, but whatever. Yeah, it's just like
I grew up on 90s and early 2000s music. I remember how shit it was.
I'm not gonna say there was. I'm not gonna say there isn't like shit music. I agree, like especially today, but like if you're really looking, I listen to like indie stuff. So, or
Yeah, but in a lot of ways, the indie stuff doesn't really count because it doesn't. Unfortunately, even though it should, it doesn't really have as much impact on the overall like music scene.
Okay, so one, fuck you on saying that it doesn't really count. That's just initial reaction, by the way.
Well, it doesn't because it. Unfortunately, none of the indie stuff is gonna shape the wider music scene. Unfortunately, like
no, it shapes me, so that really all that matters right now. But yeah. Also, so Scott Adkins, who is a famous stunt performer slash actor, he actually has his own.
he was also one of the zealots in Doctor Strange 2016.
Yeah, really cool dude. He has his own little like franchise called Hitman. Accident Man, where it's like this assassin who sets up these like super intricate assassinations that basically look like accidents, and that's how he kills people,
Mm-hmm.
with no possible way to trace it back to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was playing Killa, I think was his name. The super, basically like a John Wick version of the Kingpin.
Mm-hmm.
The dude was in a fat suit and he was doing like some acrobatic spin kick bullshit with a fight against John Wick, and it was fucking cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
screw Brendan Fraser. That's the fat suit work that needs the Oscar. But I'm saying
I've not seen The Whale. How is it?
it's okay. I found it to be a little pretentious, but I usually find like Oscar bait movies to be a little bit pretentious.
I mean, to be fair, the Oscars themselves is pretentious as fuck. So
yeah, they don't do things based on merit anymore.
did they ever?
There was a time before both of us were born that they did. I mean, the Oscars from 1994 were choosing between Forrest Gump, Shawshank Redemption, and I want to say it was Taxi Driver. There was a time when the Oscars actually selected for merit.
I thought Taxi Driver was like in the 80s.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. What was the third movie that was in in contention for the Oscars 1994 that became a like long-standing classic shortly thereafter. So I know one of them was Shawshank, and I know one of them was Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, that was the other one. So yeah, in 1994, the choices for like Best Picture included Forrest Gump, Shawshank, and Pulp Fiction. So yes, there was a time when the Oscars selected for merit. God damn it!
Right. I think the biggest issue is that it's only a small committee that select this shit, and not like the public at large.
Yeah, they don't actually let people. They also abstain from acknowledging the virtues of movies that are popular for some reason, as though like it being popular among the peasants makes it inherently invalid.
Also,
Anyway,
the invalidation of animation.
yeah, well, that's a whole other thing.
Right? Yeah,
But
we're not gonna.
I
Again,
think that's about all I have to say on the matter. So
yeah. Well, I guess my final thoughts are again, I find it to be a really enjoyable movie. Yeah, I don't think it will really. If you want to take Dalton's side, you won't really be disappointed until the very end.
yeah, and like I say, it's ambiguous enough that he might have faked his own death, so we might get a John Wick 5 eventually. Especially given that the movie made a buttload of money and Lionsgate wants to make another one.
Although I like there's a World War II movie coming out that's made by the guys who did John Wick, called Sisu, and I kind of wanted to cover that trailer when it first came out because it just looked like R-rated Swedish Captain America.
Speaking of missed opportunities of him dying in this one, we never got a nobody versus John Wick movie, and that's sad.
Nobody, as in Bob Odenkirk.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good movie. Like the guys who make those like all part of that studio that make these like action movies. There's to my memory, there's not been a bad one that's come out.
No. Also, the Santa Claus from Violent Night is the Santa Claus of the John Wick universe, and I will brook no other answer. In my head, all the movies made by that production company in that same style are in the same universe, which means that David Harbour is the Santa Claus of the John Wick universe.
Yeah. Anyway, so with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Happy Easter, all hail Ostara.